Did you ever get form from Vic Ortiz for the church board?
First,
Can you give me one more?
that's the
He said those
subdivision.
volunteers.
Yeah, you can go just the regular board thing, 'cause I don't
Yeah, he's
know.
the side of
But
Dudley.
Yeah, just the regular.
Make it here.
That was 400 and some acres, let's see who it is.
You know them? What about
Burnett.
family name?
Burnett, Tunbridge Jack.
Hernandez.
You
Mark.
know, going down 90 where that big
Yeah,
sign
sign
is.
says
Yeah.
Grove.
Yeah, I've got
He's
his
right on top
His
of the hill
wife
there.
Sylvia wants to be on the library.
Garlic.
She's very experienced in the library. I know. And I've been talking to him every day, and I gave him 4 blank copies.
Croft, okay. So
Get
it'd
Sylvia
be
to fill
across
one
the
out.
street.
And give it
Over
to
in
me.
this
I'll turn
area.
it in, and I'll
'Chacon Creek Ranch,
I'll get her on the board.
57
Lacey, the lady
acres.
that's down there, she asked me the
See
other
if
day
they've
to
got
send
any more,
her a form
like
to
a-
her mother, so that'll be good.
That'd be good.
And if this lady will get on it, that will definitely give us
Yeah.
a reason.
And the ants, they come to every single meeting.
Oh, in the city, we're
Oh,
going
right
to
there,
college
okay.
with him.
Every meeting.
Okay.
There's
I
no
talked to
good.
them one afternoon, and they
74
both said
acres.
they would be interested in being on the library board.
Okay, well, if they come in early enough tonight, I'll
Chacon
just ask
Creek
them.
Ranch,
Give them
okay, so
a-
that's this, this is
Oh,
Chacon
they have
Creek
it.
Ranch
We need
2.
to advertise it, because man,
So
Yeah.
that was
And I know Mike
47
was telling
acres.
me, you know, he
This is
said, know of
Snoopy.
anybody, and I said,
So-
I know.
Yeah,
And that's
Which would be good,
Chacon
that's
Creek Ranch,
the only
that's
board
2
for
acres,
years, that
that's
had
up to
everybody on
60.
there, and then they kind of moved in different
we
things.
need to get some new people. I mean,
Well, and
That's
on
Chacon
the
Creek
Parks
Ranch,
Board,
52 acres, so that's,
Cynthia, the lady that,
112.
she was on
Right.
for one term, she
then
said
they
she's
went
really
up
busy, I got an
to
email from her, she was on when they had
Ranch
to
to
reapply.
22, so
And
we're close
she's,
to 140 acres.
not
So
gonna
let's go
reapply.
back to
But they don't have
here.
any alternates on that board either, so we just need to work.
Research.
So hopefully we'll get some more on that. Let me
We're
get
gonna
that,
go to Chacon Creek Ranch and see if
form.
they've granted any
And,
property to anybody recently.
have it ready.
Okay.
Grantor.
Like I said, that people were, they asked me and I was like, I haven't heard anything.
Yeah, I snoop in people's business all the time. Chacon Creek Ranch. To anybody as grantor, see if it
Yeah.
happened. This is up to date, this is, well,
Right.
they aren't really up to date, so.
But still.
So it had to have happened. Bank of San Antonio, Capital Credit, Capital Phone Credit, so these are deeds of trust, that's not buying stuff, so no.
Okay,
Nothing
Yeah.
sold
yeah,
since May, or before May,
yeah.
so.
So, but I just figured I'd ask the question. I didn't tell the person that I was gonna ask you, I just, I don't know, I haven't heard anything, so.
Think?
Hi, you look familiar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, we'll see. Listen, next time,
I got only one person so far has emailed me back and added your name, but I've gotten lots of phone calls. Perfect. And I've been pulling them out of other documents. I see
perfectly
people who
fine.
live in my district, and I pull their names out, they got emailed.
Just make sure you save that onto the District 5.
Big
It's on the
account.
all of
Uh-huh.
them.
Very little space here.
And I helped Todd set his name.
I know, you already sent out his first one.
I talked to him this morning.
the same thing, they make a pile. And it's just, but these
My
two,
poor Czechoslovakian
Go
is
find your
Chevy.
mouse.
oh my
He's
gosh.
trying to do everything with his finger.
Oh, no.
Get the damn mouse and turn it on. It's easy with the mouse.
My nephew got married in Montreal, my sister
Oh,
and
yeah,
brother-in-law
yeah.
made it, and they got into the country.
They got across, really?
And it took, well, they basically sat at the airport for 8 hours at customs and then got told to go to a hotel and under supervised stay for
Yeah.
another 24 hours.
Yeah.
Finally, they said, okay. And,
Wow, they're fortunate.
yeah, she knows.
It was working, the movie people took it off.
Just trying to get to there, here we go, so that's what our guys do.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
One day at a time, you know?
You're gonna watch a movie?
Yep.
A movie time? How are you?
Greyhound?
Whippet and Italian Greyhound.
Okay.
He only weighs in at about 19 pounds. But it's okay, he's on
Tail
top.
all
He's
the
on
time,
top.
seems like.
Yeah, my, one of my brother-in-laws, he
I got
showed
daughter of an inch at the
the
race.
greyhounds at Westminster.
Quarter of an inch of rain.
They had whippets for all and everything. Oh, yeah.
He's kind of lounging.
It's all around us.
All around us. Yeah, I thought we were supposed to be dry this week.
Can I have a little piece of quick, please?
Yeah,
Can't predict it.
that's what the girls
It
do with
looks
Loki.
like some orchid development.
All right.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, that's what, I do this all day long.
I just,
What's worse is people call me and say, hey, we
His
got
name
this
is
problem.
Devin.
His name is Devin.
They can, nobody
I used to
Derek, Devin.
yeah.
understand that.
Give me that name, you say he has 25 acres. I'll show you what he has.
They're all around. What kind of TVs are there? Yeah, I know. I pulled it up all the time.
According to the appraisal district.
But still, I mean, they're the people that are supposed to know.
They're behind this a little, but
But still, I mean,
Here, I'll pull that down. We'll do it fancy.
yeah, there's a camera on there. There's a camera and a microphone on there, so we got.
yeah, smile, you're on candy camera.
Just be quiet.
Just kidding, just kidding.
The man with the plan. You got it.
Any more smoke
All right.
signals? No more smoke signals? We're moving into the 21st century?
Deborah, does Carl know to be here? Okay.
Yes.
That would be good. Be good if she arrived, yeah.
Then what are we doing tonight? Mayor is? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, she gave me the,
Wondering.
It is 5 o'clock.
All right.
Still missing this one?
No, looky here.
Barely, but here.
We're worried.
We thought you were gonna miss all the fun.
we're always worried.
Yeah, he's got his wading shorts on and everything.
Yeah? Yeah, that's been his routine this summer.
He must have come straight from the coast. You been fishing?
Hey, I don't want to hear anything from you. You're the one who walks in here shorts like that.
Oh, boy. I can't send
How are you, sir?
Hey, what's going on? Sorry.
Did you get that email I sent you?
I did.
You ready?
You said it 3 times.
Did I? No, what happened was the first time it told me it bounced because it was a TIFF file. And I looked at it and it was 101 megabytes. I thought, that's probably not going to go through. So I
Not
changed it to a
good.
PDF and it
Never bogus.
was 16 megabytes. So.
Oh, okay. At first I worried it was some kind of a spam thing.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But I didn't know I sent it a third time. I thought I was
You look lost. Oh, here, take the whole box.
You got them.
I need clean glasses.
Uh-huh, sure.
Oh, well, you got this there.
Those are mine. I put them in. You need an extension cord?
Oh, we have to use that.
You might.
Here you go.
You just might.
Well, let's wait and see if this thing has power.
You keep.
How'd you make it today?
Oh, this is new.
Yeah, you got high techy techy.
Oh, geez.
You got almost no battery. May I?
You may, sir. Don't bump your head.
Explain to me real quick. The camera plugs into that?
All right.
No, I mean, what?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
No problem. I did. I turned my phone off because you saw what was going on. My phone was going
That's why I asked
all
him.
day long.
Was that because of?
I have family arriving tomorrow from Atlanta, New Jersey, Denver, Pike Creek, not Pike Creek, Great Forest, and San Antonio.
Is this how it records the
And they're all going to
entire
converge here tomorrow.
Your audio
afternoon.
from
I got the agenda for the P&Z tomorrow night. I wrote back and said, hey, gonna make it. Sorry. They're converging.
Have
at my
higher
house.
obligations.
They're converging at my house tomorrow, so.
So basically parties at both.
Going for it.
We're dragging them all down to Luigi's.
Ah,
Oh, that'd be good.
Yeah, so I don't have to cook them.
Can we,
Yes. Because it's not, I don't know if
It's the first time around for this technology. There's going to be a bug,
That's with any new technology.
believe me.
Oh, yeah, no, trust me. I was the tester for the hospital computer
Nothing's
systems in the
dangling
Air
around
Force.
unplugged.
See, that's what you get from technology.
Days.
You think I know the recipe for the old wine flask or the little structure?
It's a driver.
Priscilla might.
well,
Anyway, I don't know.
Priscilla, run!
So we can exit out of Audacity.
oh, yeah.
Right.
I can.
I might. That's what she
I
said.
might, I heard her, yeah.
There's Pearl. Maybe.
Gina suggested you.
Oh, no, that would be Paul. I told you to run.
Hey, I have faith in her, that's all. I have faith in her.
I don't volunteer.
Sorry, we're just having technical difficulties. It'll be a second.
I don't volunteer.
No, she and I have served on the Landmark Commission for many years.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that's the
Well,
kind
that's why I asked you, 'cause I knew
that's
you
the kind
were.
of data that gets passed
Oh,
around.
yeah.
I'm sure I can find it.
Well, we used it when we did the Living History Center,
Okay.
but we followed the plans from the Landmark Inn.
Okay. So that would lead me to Vince Andermatt, who's done work at the Landmark.
Phil.
Cator. I think Landmark Inn has it.
So we
Okay,
see
I'll
if we
check
have that
it.
audio.
Well,
I'll check it.
people here will hear it. I can't record it, put it on the website.
Right.
Hey, Herb. How you doing?
I'm
Or said hi to
jinxing,
you.
jinxing her
You
machine.
can go ahead and start the meeting and I'll, it's gonna be off.
All right.
But they'll hear it through the.
Do you want to record this? We just have a recording.
Yeah, I'll have to, well, I'll have to have to.
You have plenty of time.
All right. We all set?
Yes, I have a voice recording going.
All right. Excuse the delay. So let's call the meeting to order. It is 5:07. We'll start with roll call with District 1.
Shana Martinez, District 1.
Paul Carey, District 2.
Phil King, District 3.
Derek Schroeder, Mayor. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Todd Shearhart, District 4.
Herb Dyer, District 5.
Great. So all is in attendance. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. The Pledge of Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor and Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Please remain standing for the invocation. Pastor James Mendoza from the Vista Community Church. Thanks for coming in.
You're welcome. Would you pray with me? Father, we come before you tonight, and we just thank you for the work that you've done long before we ever arrived on the scene. You've been at work in this community. Lord, you will be working long after every one of us is gone in this community. But Lord, while we were here, you've entrusted this group of individuals to make decisions to what's the best for this community. So God, I just pray for wisdom, not only tonight, but every time they meet. Lord, that they would make the best, wisest decision possible to bless this community. Help all their decisions always be right and fair according to you and your word. We ask all these things, Jesus, in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I gotta ask, is that a religious shirt?
It's a good shirt. It's got to be somewhat holy. After that again, the other night, right?
All right, next is citizens' comments. Do we have anybody that wants to speak for citizens' comments? No. All right. Next item is consent agenda. There were a couple of things on here. Deborah, I talked to you about those. The one, I think that this was just maybe a misstatement. It states that the Mayor Schroeder said the Regional Traffic Coalition had been formed under former Mayor Santleben. So she had actually just put together a citizens community, of which I was a part. So was Paul. So I think that we just need to get that changed up to be able to reflect that.
Okay, so she did not form a commission.
She did not?
She just appointed a committee.
She appointed a committee, right?
I don't know what the difference is, but that's perfect.
A bunch of folks sitting around or a dedicated group of
Right.
stakeholders.
Right.
And then there were a couple of key items that I just wanted to make sure that we get recorded in the minutes, and those were about the things from the mayor's report, just kind of the key takeaways, and I'll do better about making sure that I identify those on there. So I think that maybe we just modify this. Can we just get this modified with the changes that we talked about? I'll show them to you, and then we'll bring it back again for next time. Just, there were some key items about where we are, what we're doing, and I just want to make sure that we capture that well for future councils. I know that I look back at the minutes, and Deborah does too, and it's good to be able to tell that story and explain what we're looking at.
I'm thinking about procedure. You can go ahead and motion to accept the minutes with the changes as recommended by the mayor, if you so choose. Or you can pull them and say, we're just not going to do the minutes this evening and bring them back next time with the changes so that everybody can see those changes. But that's up to you. You can do it either way.
You guys want to just pull it?
I would move that we pull the minutes from the consent agenda.
Is there anything
Okay.
else on it?
Perfect.
That's the only thing on consent.
Right.
So
Okay. Do we need a motion, a second, and a vote? Just take it off?
you just
Okay, take that one off.
take no action on that item.
Perfect. All right, next item, swearing in ceremony of Code Enforcement Officer Carl Brooks.
Congratulations.
Okay, I'm still not completely familiar with the process.
Okay.
Is it?
Girl.
She's going to move the camera and then she'll.
She moved it for
She
you.
moved it for you.
Camera's easier.
Raise your
right hand.
and read that out.
There you go.
Easy enough.
I, Carl G. Brooks, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the duties of Code Enforcement Officer for the City of Castroville of the State of Texas, and will, to the best of my abilities, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States and of this state, so help me God.
And then you'll sign that, I'll make you a copy.
She's official. It's official.
Well, I got-
Yeah, there you
Camera
go.
In front of the box, there you go.
Bueno.
Is the back row distracting her while she's getting her picture made? All right. Would you mind if I speak to a couple items on this? Or, please. So just for clarity, first off, thank you, Carl, for your willingness to do this, to put yourself out there in this respect. What she has just done is sworn herself as an officer of the state of Texas to allow her to enforce the local ordinance. You all, at the prior meeting, the meeting just prior to this one, I believe, took a step to adopt by ordinance the ability to enforce these, our local nuisance ordinances through our court. So we said we're going to make these punitive in nature, but so that requires us to have an officer. It's not just a matter of swearing her in. She actually has to take classes and be prepared, and she'd already done a lot of that work on her own to be ready for this day. So we appreciate her willingness to do that. What I would like to clarify, just from an admin standpoint, is that our intent as a city is to continue to enforce our code the way we always have, to work with our folks who are having issues, whether they have nuisance violations or what have you, that are going against our ordinances, to try and get that resolved in as amicable as a fashion as possible. However, for those people who we've done everything we possibly can to try and abate the issue and allow them to abate it, this now allows us to add one more layer of judicial ability to go and say, okay, now here's a fine, if you will, here's a citation, thank you. And you're going to have to go before the judge to get this resolved. So we weren't able to do that now in the past, but we are able to do that now. I know that some of you have dealt with frustrated citizens who ask, well, why hadn't this been taken care of? And really, you don't have a lot of teeth if you don't have that ability to issue a citation. I think I shared with you in the past when we did code enforcement in Ennis, we went through a shift, a change from how we conducted code enforcement to something more like what we're hoping to do here in Castroville. There, we wrote as many as 2,000 citations a year. Of those, less than 1% ever actually had a judgment. Meaning, we wrote the citation, it was a means to an end to get the person to say, hey, we're serious about getting this done. Sometimes it would go as far as getting a court date established, et cetera, but didn't ever have to go before the judge, or if it did go for the judge, it was able to be abated without having a fine against that citizen. And that's my hope here as well. I mean, obviously, it's always up to the homeowner, the person that's responsible for that issue, to deal with it. But I just want to give the impression that, okay, now we've got a cop out there, we're going to do code enforcement, that it's going to get a lot more heavy-handed. I don't expect that at all from Curl. She's got a great attitude. She's the perfect, I think, personality to do this type of work. And so we appreciate all that she does. She's done, already volunteers a lot of her time. I've seen her around in the community in places where I didn't expect to see her. What are you doing here? It's your day off. And she's volunteering for some organizations. So we greatly appreciate that.
Great. Yep, totally agree. All right, thank you. All right, next item is the city administrator's monthly report.
So I don't think I'm going to speak to every item in the report. They are listed in the agenda. I'm just going to glance at this. So we are waiting, like on the property damage on the airport, the insurance adjuster is basically vetting different contractors to begin that work. So we expect that we'll probably have a contractor chosen, and the work will begin within the next 2 to 4 weeks. I believe that's in that report. On the pool building, the rain delayed the inspector to come out and look at that. So we're just as a refresh, we had a bunch of damage out there. We had it looked at. The original insurance adjuster said, no, this is settling or whatever it is, but it's not a covered event. We had another engineer come out to look at, okay, what do we need to do to fix it? And he suggested that this was not settling, that it's actually wind damage. And so now we went back to the insurance agent, or insurance, and stated that. So look, we've got a conflicting engineer's report. So they have selected an engineer to come out and look at it, to assess it, whether it is indeed wind damage, and then what the coverage would be. And that's where we are in that process. That engineer has come out and did an assessment. COVID relief bill funding. I know this is a big one. We did finally I actually got contacted The weekend of July 4th, I believe my email came in on either Saturday or Sunday. Yeah, it was really weird. And I actually didn't get it directly. It went to, I think, for our city, it went to her. What they've been doing is reaching out to the mayors and finance directors of each city, but I don't believe Leroy's.
I sent it to the mayor.
Right, I know that we got it through you, but by the time I got it through you, Herb, I'd already gotten it from other city managers and other groups to tell me, hey, this is out there. So we've taken the step to apply for that funding and request it. I did not, interestingly enough, when we went into that system, have a list of what can be spent for yet. So we're going to be very cautious, and I will update you with all that information as soon as we have it. Whatever they give us, you'll have access to, and we'll talk about it in a future meeting and how that money can be spent. But the total, I believe, is in the report, and I don't remember off the top of my head.
$774,000.
674?
$772,844.38.
All right, so 772, and we'll get that over 2 years, so we'll get half of that probably within the next 30 days. So what the state of Texas is doing, they have not officially requested the funds from DC. What they've done instead is put TDM, the Texas Department of Emergency Management, in charge of the funds, and said, we want to get all the cities registered over the next 30 days. By the end of, I think it's by August 30th, they want to try and get 85 to 90% of the non-entitlement cities, the non-entitlement units, which is all cities under, I think, 50,000. They want to get as many of those registered through their system, so they know who they are. They have all the details they need, and then they'll go apply for the funding, and they'll get what they need. But their target, I think, is 85 or 90% participation first. So we've, along with many other cities, we've taken those steps to do that. I think we have till August 2nd to get registered on the site, and then of course that'll prompt them to go and find the ones that haven't done it yet and get that started.
And
That's
it's not
really
bad, I mean, or even if, with them splitting it up, it's still $386,422.19. So that
we were not expecting. Yeah. So we'll find out what we can use it for, and I'll be advising you on that in the near future. Fiber optics, the mayor and I, as we went to lunch today, noticed that the fiber is literally laying in the road to be hung, so they are moving forward on that process to bring fiber to City Hall. 4th of July, I'd be remiss in not recognizing Devin and everybody he worked with. I know our police department and volunteers from the Chamber of Commerce, from local banks, others were very instrumental in planning that. I thought it was splendid. I don't know how of you all who all were able to attend. I know I saw the mayor and I saw Paul, but I'm sure others of you were there as well. A lot of people turned out. We can always do better, so we are going to have a kind of after action, but I couldn't be more pleased with Devin and the rest of the group for their efforts in putting on what I thought was a spectacular July 4th celebration. So kudos to him and everybody that helped do that.
And the fact that they put it together, because we had only approved it, what, 3 months before that?
Not much notice.
Yeah, on not much notice, and everybody even the very last statement in the paper was, the event was a total success, and people were thrilled with it. There were little minor things that could have been done differently, but overall, I was worried. I was worried about this through the whole process. Telling Scott every day, I'm like, it's going to be terrible. It's going to be terrible. It's going to be terrible. But it was just because I worry about this kind of stuff. But it was wonderful.
Well, and the weather was fantastic.
Weather was
cool
fantastic.
Breeze. It wasn't a million degrees outside, so we were really blessed in a lot of different ways on that day. Glad we didn't have any fires. We didn't have any other issues.
No fires.
I would like us to talk about location of the fireworks. So one of the things that I'll be talking about in that small group, and that we'll bring for some type of council consideration, is where to set them off, where we set them off on at the hill, made them visible to the rest of the city, which is a good thing. But if you were in the park, if you drove all that way to see the fireworks, you actually didn't have a very good view at all because of where the amphitheater is versus where they were shot off. So that's something for us to consider for next year, but we have a year, a little less than a year now. So
More than 3 months.
Plan for that. Thoroughfare planning, just an update tomorrow. The mayor and I will be meeting with some stakeholders with the county and their engineer to look at what that planning effort has consisted of. So I have nothing substantive to report other than there will be a meeting. And then following that meeting, we'll have another meeting with TxDOT with a larger group. And then following that meeting, we'll have another meeting with an even larger group of stakeholders. So we are gradually trying to get our arms around this very important issue, that being transportation and just all the concerns that the development are going to bring with that, or to that issue. And then I'll just mention two others, kiosk. I had mentioned this earlier on about just making the potential for making some customer service improvements, streamlining our software, et cetera. We've been evaluating over the last several months a software option that is put out by the same group that does the kiosk. The kiosk would be a mobile pay solution and a pay in person solution. It can do everything that an ATM can do. You'd be able to pay, the end game is that anybody who needs to pay the city for anything would be able to do it through this kiosk. Immediately, however, library services, permitting, people who need permits, those things would not be included right off the bat. It'd basically just be for court fines and utility bills. But the idea is that eventually it would handle all of those things. So included in your packets is a quote for what those things cost. They run about $35,000 to buy one, but then the annual expense is around $7,000. So when you think about just the ability to handle more customers, more billing, other things as the city grows, that cost is fixed, that support cost. So it's about the way I look at it, it's the cheapest person you can hire. It's bilingual, it's available 24 hours a day, it takes cash, it always dispenses the right amount. If you have a problem, you call a number. I've used it in 2 other cities and I think it's gone very well. Herb had a question though.
Question, will RV, people who are renting spaces in the RV park be able to pay for their RV space on that machine?
That's a great question. I know they can already, I'm fairly certain they can already pay online. And so my goal, it won't, not from day one, but my goal would be that any financial transaction that needs to come through the city will be able to handle me through this. And what we're looking at doing, and you saw this in the same report, is again, the same group that builds and provides the software support for these machines also provides a comprehensive software solution for the city, for our payroll and our accounts payable and all of that. So we're looking at implementing them for that purpose. It would be budget neutral. In fact, it would be a little bit of a savings to the city, the cost of making that change. But any software change comes with all sorts of challenges. So even though I'm pretty excited about some of the improvements that their software will be able to provide us, we're taking slow steps in that direction to make sure that, one, we're making the right decision, and two, that as we make those changes, we provide as little interruption to the rest of the city as possible. And the other thing I was going to mention was bed and banks permits. So that process has been ongoing. We hadn't talked about it in a while, but I didn't want you to think that because we hadn't talked about it, nothing was happening. We've had a number of conversations between staff and our engineering partners at K-Freeze. They are putting together the application packet, and at the July 27th meeting, which is our next regular meeting this month, we will talk more about bed and banks. So I just wanted to give you a brief update in my report. Beyond that, are there any other questions about any of the items in the report or any of the items listed on the agenda?
I did want to commend you on the water rights, the way that you're looking at this. I want to dig into that pretty deeply. We've talked about this in terms of looking at it that is one of the city assets, and looking at historical use, how many total acre feet do we have, how many do we use, how many are pumped, how many are charged for. So I think that this is a good area to do a pretty deep dive in here, and especially as you're looking at, you've already identified quite a bit of savings that we can get by restructuring that, and then potentially leasing some of the excess back to Edwards Aquifer Authority. I really like the way that you're looking at that, but I want to make sure that we're doing it so that we understand the total amount that we actually need, so that we have it ready to go. So just wanted to commend you on that. Good detail.
Thank you, because any downward pressure we can put on our rates. I know we're going to talk about rates, we're going to talk about our tax rate here in just a second, our budgets. There's a lot of effort by staff, not just me, but by our staff, everybody that's in charge of these different organizations, to push down our expenditures, our costs, look for ways to create new revenue, put those revenue increases where they belong to maybe people, a limited group of users, as opposed to the entire city subsidizing something. So we're looking at those types of things so that we can minimize the pressure to increase rates or increase rate.
You're leveraging assets that we already have
Right.
to drive revenue, so that we don't have to take it from people.
Right.
It's good.
On the Ameresco says 60 water meters have already been replaced. Were they in a certain area in town or throughout town?
No, throughout town, so we went through a pretty extensive process to identify what might be some sample meters. As we went out to go do those, we probably 10 or so that we ended up not replacing for one reason or another. We had a list of maybe, I think it was 120, Kathy's here, but we had a much longer list than the number that they actually needed to replace for that very purpose, so that if they got to one they couldn't do for one reason or another, we could skip to a different one. But yeah, they were spread out all over.
Okay, thank you.
And they had a lady here, I was impressed, she was here for like 2 or 3 days, and she walked virtually the whole town and put eyes on a lot of different places, different meters. Really did a very extensive, what they call field survey of our existing infrastructure. So it's all the things that they said they were going to do, but it was interesting to see it actually being done.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Not here.
All right, next item, consider and take appropriate action on applications submitted for open seats on city boards and commissions. Deborah, are you covering this, or you want me to?
Sure,
Thanks.
or it doesn't matter.
Please.
We just have the one board tonight, the zoning board of adjustments. There's 3 applications. Marcus Fuentes is here tonight. We have Linda Guerra, position 5 is, all of these are reappointments that have been requesting this. Linda Guerra is on the full board. Her position number 5 is up. Milton Tice, position number 4. And then Marcus Fuentes is position alternate number 2. Alternate number 1, Robbie, I think it's Clacker. He did put his application back in. I do have it in here. His term is not up. And when I emailed him, he said, you know, if you're looking at full board positions, he would like to be considered. He's only been on the board for about a year and has not attended any meetings. I think I wrote that in there. So he needs a little, I think, more experience possibly. I know this board doesn't meet often, but, you know, he wasn't able to meet at the last meeting, so.
Agreed. Cracked me up, actually, with Junior's resident of Castroville for forever, years.
Forever.
Love that. All right. Great.
Each one of these members that are on the full board, I know, Marcus, you've been on 2 years? Yes, this is his first term to come up. Each one of them have been on for quite a few years.
All right, do I have a motion?
I move that we approve Mr. Tice, Ms. Guerra, and Mr. Fuentes for reappointment to the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 May I clarify?
Yes.
Is this for each position they're already in, or is that correct?
Is that what they're asking for, reappointment to the same position?
Yes. I just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
No, I saw that in the application, but we don't have a vacancy that isn't being refilled, so. Yeah.
Okay, so do we get that?
Yes.
All right, cool. Thanks, and I know you've stepped up on there when you're needed, so I appreciate the fact that you
I also
go to
put
this.
for Parks and Rec, but you didn't bring it up last time because I was asking them.
And you know what? Well,
It was brought up last month and I was actually watching it and you didn't come up.
and I will resubmit that, because if you submitted your application for that, and maybe we talked about it, and I
That
apologize.
was the second choice on the.
Okay, and I did not catch that. I will put that back on the next meeting. There is a position open, so,
Unfortunately,
and I'm glad you told me.
Thank you,
Thanks
Marcus.
for bringing it up. It's not on the meeting, it's on the agenda tonight, so you won't be able to take action tonight, but we'll have it on the 27th.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need people on parks.
For sure.
Thanks, Marcus.
Great, yeah, thanks,
For
Marcus.
bringing that up.
I'd hope I'd catch that.
You're human.
There's no possibility. There's possibility.
No, she's not human. She's like Superwoman.
All right, next item is discussion on adopting an increase to the CPS electrical franchise fee.
This is something else that I think y'all looked at before I was hired, at least been discussed a while back. What we're talking about is an increase in the franchise fee for the area that is not within our CCN. So this would be the area on basically mainly the east, sorry, I almost said west, but the east side of town, where CPS is serving within our city limits, but it's not within our electrical CCN. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I've given you the figures. It's not a lot of money as far as potential revenue currently. Of course, as that area develops, it could add up to some revenue. Right now, I think it's $4,000 or $4,500 with the estimated increase in revenue. But this is simply an action that would,
Sets us for the future.
Yeah, it's optional to you. Most cities, when presented with this opportunity, jump on it. It's another opportunity just to, even if it's a small amount, it's more than a steak dinner, as I like to say. Tonight, this is discussion only. This would be done by ordinance. We do not have an ordinance prepared for you. I wanted to have the discussion first with you all and give you that opportunity. And then if you choose to move forward, we'll bring an ordinance for that purpose.
With all the new meters that we anticipate seeing in the next few years, this would probably be a good idea.
Right, in that area, certainly.
Yeah.
And so Alsatian Oaks lies within this area, just to be
Right.
clear, that proposed development, and all the others, frankly, and there's a number of.
Country
developments.
Village Estates is not in there, but the rest that are happening east are.
Everything west.
Did we see a line drawn on a map somewhere?
Well, we have
Yes.
the CCN map, but I don't know where it is.
What's that?
I'd just like to say, I'm so happy to see this chart in the package. I hope this is the chart that I think it is, that has the contract numbers for the 7 zones.
Yes, I would mention that's confidential, so please don't.
Now, I'm not going to talk about it, I just want
Yeah.
to, I want to say how grateful I am to see it, because I've been trying to get this information since 2018, and I was unsuccessful
It's in my
all this time, and this is the first time I've seen it.
I don't see a chart.
I just wanted to ask one question.
Yes, sir.
I think
What chart?
Were you talking about?
it's
It's
the
in
chart
the
that's,
report. It's in
comes
Excel.
right after the discussion about the kiosk. There's a chart that says contract account.
It's kind of out of place.
Oh, it's in the
Oh,
report.
other way.
Okay, okay.
It should be
It's on
there.
page 17 of 27.
Got it.
Okay, 'cause
Okay,
it
thank
took
you.
me a while to figure it out, but this is the chart. But we can't discuss the individual numbers, but I would like to get a little clarification of this.
Sure.
It shows the zones, I understand that, and I think these are quarters, that the O's, those are quarterly amounts.
Yeah.
And then it shows a total amount billed, which is the sum of the 3 quarters. That
Yeah.
makes good sense. But what I don't understand, the last one says the quarterly franchise fee.
Yes.
Is the fee different than the amount billed? Because the
Yes.
numbers are nowhere close.
Yes.
So
So
one-
that fee is, this is just, so that's just the.
Is this the additional
and that's-
1% you're asking
No,
for?
that's the current amount.
And it's
I
a-
think we can adopt, I did this math, it's just been a while. If this is, John, so is this 2% right now, or is it?
3%.
We're at 3 already, and we go up to 4?
I thought we were at 4 and going to 5.
So if we're already at 3, this is the 3%.
Okay.
Or that's the quarter.
Can
So
you
have to-
explain
Yeah.
the verbiage, though? It says quarterly amount billed, and then quarterly franchise fee, and they're like nowhere. Why are
Because
we
that-
billing, why are we getting a fee that's equal to what we billed?
No, so.
How does it work?
It's a percent, the fee is a percentage of the bill amount. So the fee is always going to be a very small amount. It's
Okay,
not-
so that's the amount that the customers got billed, and we
Yes.
get a percent, we get 3% of that as a franchise fee.
Right.
Now, and you're asking us to raise it to 4%. Now it's
Correct, by
perfectly
1%.
Thank you.
And since that's a quarterly fee.
So
that's-
this,
and
this
it's at
last column would
3%,
go up by 1/4 or 1/3.
So that,
That's why it says around $4,500. That's just simple math.
so
Basically
4.5
cents.
But not for everybody.
4.5%.
Just for the ones
Just for
that are
the-
out of our CCN.
And to clarify, that is going from 4, and thank you for calling that out. It's going from 4.5 to 5.5.
Okay, I can
And so,
Because
like,
these
if-
numbers come out to 4.5%.
So I used to get a CPS bill. On every CPS bill, it says there's a line item for franchise fee. There's a bird inside.
I know, I honestly thought, this is great.
I saw a red bird out there.
So, yeah, there's a line item for franchise fee, and that's just an,
So it's 4.5 to 5. Right, okay.
does that make sense?
That makes perfectly
Okay.
good sense to me. Thank you.
Yeah, they're getting, those other amounts, that's what CPS is getting paid, because they're CPS customers, not ours.
Great. All right, then, before we get into the budget work session, let's talk about discussion on future agenda items.
I think, has everybody indicated on that last one that they're in favor of that?
Well, this is
We're not
just
voting.
a discussion, we're talking about it.
But I want to know whether I should bring it back, and so to Phil's
Do
point.
you have any concerns with it?
No, I think you should bring it back. I'm in favor of it.
I didn't either, till just now.
All right, any other questions, discussion items? What?
I apologize, we probably shouldn't have a header on top of that thing. It was intended to go right behind the report, but
Yeah, we found your email.
What's scary is I knew exactly, I think that Herb had the same, you go through it, you see exactly what it was, and I'm like, I know what that is. All right, cool. All right, any future agenda items that we want to make sure that we get caught right now?
I would like to. One of them is some months ago, John gave us an update on the repairs required at the ponds, the containment ponds at the wastewater treatment plant, that's been some months ago, and is there any update on that?
I'm going to preempt you because we're going to talk about that as part of the capital planning.
Okay, be that way. And,
Be proactive.
the other one is animal control. I know Blue used to pick up animals, dogs and cats, and they went somewhere, and then people would adopt them, or people could go get them. What's the current plan? Is that still happening? Are we still putting animals up behind the wastewater treatment plant? Just, I don't, people asked me the other day, and somebody asked me, and I have no idea what's going
So
on.
since it's not on the agenda, I won't discuss it with you. But I will say that on the next, the next agenda at the council meeting, these staff reports, I'll ask the chief to provide a thorough report on animal control, just what's what of what we're currently doing.
Right.
What's happening?
Yep. Well, yeah, what our current process consists of.
And if there's some, is that what we're going to continue on? Because I don't know what the plan is, or is it vamping into something else? I know we used to have a place to put the animals, and now we don't, so I don't know what.
To my knowledge,
what's
there's
going on.
no, unless you all indicate differently, there's no plans to change our animal control policies, procedures.
And I'm just joking, but we're not shooting them, I'm assuming, so I don't know what's going on.
We're not dropping them off in Honda.
No,
Not
no,
dropping
sir.
them off in Hondo, so,
We follow all state
yeah,
laws and regulations regarding wild animals.
sounds good. But someone asked me, so if you could update us, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
You're going to do it anyway,
And
so
I'll give you
great.
some pictures as well, because I don't know that, even though some of you probably see it, I don't know who has and who hasn't, so we'll do that. Pictures of the facility, not of the animals.
Okay.
Let's want those two.
Anybody else? Is there anything that we
I
have?
had committed to having the initial report on paper streets for next regular scheduled meeting.
Okay, are you ready for that one?
I'm going to send it to
It's going to
Scott.
be ready or not.
Yeah, I'm going to send it to Scott prior to the meeting, and we might need to discuss something before we do a full presentation, so.
Okay. All right, paper streets, anything else for right now?
Storm drainage, I'd like to see, I know we're going to discuss it in the capital plan, but I'd like to understand from the other council members what their feeling is in their district about storm drainage problems, because I know I get inundated with calls and very unfriendly emails from people in District 5 who have lived here their whole life and are very, very upset with council's action. And I would like to know if I'm the only one,
Council's inaction.
or if we're all in the same boat. And then I would like to know, are we going to prioritize the whole problem so we understand how big it is and which is most important and which is least important, and are we going to do something about it? I'd like to get that on an agenda.
So do we, do you feel like we should cover that in, as a council agenda item or as a part of the capital planning sessions?
I think we can do both. So When we go through the budget, I'll explain what the process is for capital planning, because keep in mind, what I'm trying to do is not necessarily come up with an answer for all of our capital woes and where we're going to spend money. The main goal is to provide enough money for capital investment, not necessarily choose where that money is going to be spent. That needs to be a well-thought-out, well-prioritized, well-analyzed solution, right? And it's nothing we can afford to fix in day one. Like in 1 year or 2 years, it's going to take a multi-year kind of dedicated approach to fixing all these issues, not just drainage, but also streets and parks and all the other areas that we find lacking. So, but I think, if you're asking my opinion, yeah, I think we could all benefit from some discussion, as Herb or as Councilman Dyer has requested, just to hear what are your observations, what are you hearing, where are the serious issues? Because if nothing else, it informs me and helps me when I'm talking to our engineer about these are the areas that we think we need to focus on. All right, we need to go analyze.
I think that's a good idea. Let's set it as a council item, and we'll talk about it during the capital planning process. And part of that is we'll talk about the approach, make sure that everybody's on board with the approach, and make sure that we get that out to the people that are concerned about it, to make sure that they are aware that we are dealing with it, let them know how we're dealing with it, and after we make decisions on that during that item, then they can, hold us accountable for it, basically.
I think it's very important when we have the discussion about paper streets that we kind of tie these two subjects together, because when the forefathers designed this town, the paper streets were meant to be the main drainage at the time. And today, they still are. So the two subjects are related, and it will help us to understand the problem if we talk about that in the discussion.
I don't think that do you feel like we're ready, because we're going to put the paper streets on the next agenda, do you feel like we're ready to approach the drains at the same time?
No.
Okay.
No, I will, again, you can, as a council, we're just talking about future agenda items, we're not deliberating anyway. You can talk about drainage whenever you feel like it. I won't have very much to give you as far as data or analysis or looking at what areas are priorities over others. So I don't think it hurts to have that conversation at any time, frankly. And I think the level of conversation that Councilman Dyer is asking for would be appropriate on the 27th.
Okay.
That could happen.
Why don't we do that then? We'll put it on the 27th, and then we'll talk about the approach that we're, the way that we're approaching this really, really high level, make sure that council is good with that, and then we can start digging into that more. Okay.
I didn't want to make light of anyone's issues, because I know we've had some serious flooding issues, but Councilman Dyer did say that he had been inundated by calls, and I wanted to ask if he felt like he might have been flooded by requests as well. Wasn't sure.
Too soon.
No pun intended.
I'm glad I have a four-wheel drive vehicle, because every time it rains, I go out there and look. And there's a lot of places that are inundated.
Right. I didn't know if that was a
flooded.
psychological slip of the tongue or not, but I thought I'd point it out.
I just have one thing, and it's an informational thing.
Yes.
I know we had approved some projects, whether it be streets being redone and everything. If we can get an update on those projects about, are they on track to kick off, on time, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, y'all just had an update not long ago, and we haven't, nothing has changed from the last update, which is, I think it was literally, what, you're laughing at me, but I think it was a month ago.
No, we don't have no projected start dates yet?
On streets? No, we do. We're still, so the.
Oh, we didn't have that
Well, the
last
bid's in the
time.
paper right now,
Well,
right?
the next meeting will have the contract.
Right. So,
Okay.
so the schedule, there is a Gantt chart for the schedule. We're still on pace for that schedule.
Okay.
Whatever the updated schedule was, because I think we did miss a time frame from the initial projection, so we're behind by about a month. But right now, as of the last time I gave an update, we're on schedule, because they've put the plans together, they issued them, they've done the pre-construction meeting, they had the pre-bid meeting, not pre-bid. So we should get bids in and be ready to present you with those bids and a preferred contractor and award the contract at the next meeting on July 27th,
What
which is
about
right
any
where we hope to be.
What about any other projects that we had that was going to be getting done? Like CCTV on the pipes and stuff like that?
Is that streets related?
No, any project.
All right, so you would like an update on
On
capital, any capital projects where we stand?
Correct.
Okay.
That way we have an idea.
Sure.
Because people ask us,
Sure.
are we doing stuff?
And the short answer is yes, but I'll get you a list of all of them, and we'll tell you, I'll just show you, here's all the capital projects we have going for the current year. Yeah, because we do have quite a bit of money. We're going to talk about this in a minute, how much we had originally budgeted for capital in the current budget, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Kirk, going back to your question, you've seen that report that was done about 20 years ago that mostly affected your district related to drainage. Have you seen that?
Yes,
Okay.
I've seen a lot of them.
Well, this was the one done by Freeze Nichols, I think, and all the projects were corrected except for that last project. But you have that report,
I
right?
believe I do.
Okay, if you don't, let me know and I'll send you a
Okay,
copy
I'll
of
look
it.
again.
How old was the
Could be push, it was when Bob Hancock was mayor, so 20 years ago?
and K-Freeze did it?
I thought so. It could have been.
I didn't think they'd been with
Freeze
us
and
that long.
Nichols do what?
I didn't think they'd been with us that long.
Oh, no, this is,
Was it KSA?
yeah, this was, there's a.
The gallery's giving me some information. What?
Yeah, I don't think it's K-Freeze. I think it's.
Oh, excuse me, not K-Freeze, Freeze and Nichols.
Might have been KSA. But anyway,
Yeah. You're right, it was not K-Freeze, they haven't been out around that long. I stand corrected.
All right. Anything else on that? And then, and I'll just kind of tease this one. Tina and I went and put up the signs for the town hall next week. So we're going to do don't forget about the town hall next week, talking about the River Bluff Power things. And so just a teaser to remind people, and then we'll have that as an agenda item on.
and that'll be at 6:30 p.m. in this room. We're doing it a little bit later just so people have an opportunity to come and participate in that meeting.
You think you're going to have more people show up than will fit in this room?
I hope
I mean,
not.
what
We'll see.
turn-
I asked for Braden Keller
I wouldn't be surprised.
I mean.
when I was asked about this. I said Braden Keller because of the number of people in the neighborhood.
I think you're going to have a lot of people show up.
I don't think that got across. Sorry. It might have been thrown out as an idea, but I don't think as staff, we didn't understand that was the place that,
I mean, it's not a small neighborhood.
right.
But I think too, it's clear now that it's going to be live streamed, where it wasn't clear in the original announcement that it was going to be live streamed. So maybe many people may choose to stay home and watch it.
That's a good idea. Let's make sure that we post that on the website. I'll do the same thing on my Facebook page.
It's hard to
It'll be
figure out
live streamed.
Yeah.
And the people-
And we're
Send a
we're
link.
now working, right? Is audio now working or not?
Not really.
Not really?
I
Okay.
was trying.
Okay.
So a lot of practice on the system then before the meeting. That way if we advertise live
Well-
stream.
Right.
The live stream is fine.
Yeah, but
It's my
people-
regular audio that I do and put up on our website the next day.
I see.
And it's because we were messing with the computer.
All right, do we need to open the budget work session?
No,
We
this
just
is
did
part of we're just
The
moving into
regular
the next
agenda?
item.
Oh, and I forgot I was going to be calling out times on these.
But you
Okay.
can call the time out on this if you want.
All right, so we're going to start into the budget work session at 6:50 PM. First item is summary and discussion.
5:50 p.m.
That's what I meant.
I'm trying to speed it up. Thank you.
5:50. Just trying to get us moving
Well,
along.
I've been in the trucks for an hour.
All right, so number 12, summary and discussion on July 6, 2021, special called work session on FY 2021 budget, proposed FY 2022, general fund, and mission, vision, and values.
Do you want to timestamp those as well as we get through them? Or I can timestamp them as we go to different pieces if you like?
Yep.
Because we're going to go through the general, we're going to review the current budget, the one we're in right now, the current year. We're going to then talk about the proposed for next year, the general fund. Then we'll move into proposed for utility funds and other special funds. And then we'll move into the mission, vision, values.
Okay, yeah, if you don't mind, just, since you're leading the conversation, just timestamp them as you go.
I will do my best. Remind me if I forget.
Right.
I do want to acknowledge we have this new setup. It was not terribly expensive. It was about $1,500. $500 of that was just the controller that I'm using to communicate with. This controller gives us a lot of options. One of them will be to be able to interrupt the live stream with this video if we wanted to do so in the future. So that's something that we'll have to get boned up on how to do. But thank you to Devin and his crew for getting this done. I asked him to do it like literally on Thursday, and they had it done by today, which is pretty impressive. So these first slides should look very familiar. This is what we went over at the last meeting. They have not changed. This is your general revenue by source, so that's your sales tax, property tax, municipal court, parks and rec, and other revenue. You'll see that about 38% is sales tax and 34% is property tax. So those are your two largest by far, 1.2 and 1.1 million respectively. There's your general fund budget. This is broken out by categories, so personnel, supplies, purchase services, contracted services, education, training, technology, repairs and maintenance, miscellaneous, and capital outlay. So you can see that the largest expense by far is personnel. That's $2.2 million. And that's pretty typical. In fact, we're better than most in my experience. Sometimes personnel can make up 85% of the budget, meaning it just doesn't leave you very much to do anything with. And here at least we have about half that we can go spend on other things. And the part of that is because you are cash funding capital outlay, which is 5% of this cost, and then the contracted services at around 10%. If you think about it this way, those contracted services were in-house employees, your personnel would be more like 65 to 70%. Actually, it could be closer to 75 because there's a reason we contract out as opposed to having them in-house. It's more expensive generally to have them in-house. This is your general fund by department. Just kind of shows you where you're spending your money. We talked about this in terms of kind of priorities. When you think about what's most important to you, what do you value most, it should be reflected in the budget. And I think that is to some extent. Your largest expenditure item is going to be city admin at 1.1. Now that's finance, HR, city secretary, myself, all rolled into one. That's the reason it looks as expensive as it is. But the very next highest is your police and animal control at 1.1 million. And then close after them is streets. Now part of streets is going to be your capital expenditure. That's not all personnel, obviously. And then behind that is parks. And if you looked at what you all prioritized as a group and what you valued, that closely mirrors what you value and what you want to try and spend money on. So this is just a look at each department by those same categories when we look at personnel, supplies, et cetera. And I'm going to kind of flip through this municipal court, library. I do want to ask, did any of you have any challenges or problems accessing this or any of the other documents that we put out there? And it's okay if you haven't accessed them yet, but if you have any issues, please let me know. I did email out a link. I appreciate the mayor's help with that. I think I better understand how that works. I still need to go find mine, like those web pages for the other teams that I'm in. So I need to get that. But anyway, if you have any issues, please let me or the mayor know, and we'll be glad to try and help you get that contact. But all this is out there if you look at your heart's content, including the Excel sheet that backs this up. So it's not just the presentation. You can go look at the numbers. It's everything. It's all the numbers. It's not just, I mean, it's the whole budget. So you can look at any aspect of it. If you have any questions, let me know. There's PD, parks. So you'll see 20% is in supplies. A lot of that's pool related. There's just the chemical, those types of things are pretty expensive. There's your streets. Cap outlay is $25,000. You do have there is more capital in streets than this 25. Mm-hmm. We're spending roughly 250 in the current project.
Scott, can you back up one with the parks? Okay. So we're about 100,000 on supplies, and I think half that's for chemicals.
I believe so. Again, I can dive into that when I look at the
yeah, because the price for chlorine and all that has gone crazy high because they don't have any employees to work at the plants to make the chemicals.
I want to
And
keep
they're
on. This
having
was
to ration and everything.
This is also the budget, so this isn't year-to-date. This is just what you budgeted in the current budget. This is not proposed. We're only looking at the current budget right now. All right, there's community development. You'll see 42% is contracted services. That's generally offset by revenue, just so you know. We do outsource to Bureau Veritas to do our inspections. And so anytime we do a building permit, we charge a fee. That fee is commensurate with the cost plus a 5% revenue for the city. So just know you see a pretty big expense, but that's actually, a lot of that's offset. Now, some of it's engineering, which we don't get paid back for, depending on the nature of the engineering. There's your city administration. Again, this is not just me. This is me, Deborah, Leroy, Beck. Yeah, everybody he has in his office, plus Hilda. So it's I don't know how many people total, 8.
Everybody in the building?
Not everybody in the
Except for
building,
court.
because court, Liz will be separate. She'll be in municipal court, and then the customer service, April, is not considered part of admin, and Patricia is utility billing, so she's part of utility billing, or part of utilities. So it's really just the people on that side of the office.
When you say admin, it would be salaried employees? Everybody, or not so much?
No, I think they are. I think almost every position is salaried. That's a good observation. I think almost everybody in there is salaried. We do have a part-time person, but I think she's salaried. Yeah, she's part-time. Hopefully that's true. There's your budget. Again, the miscellaneous, that's going to be Tour de Castroville and July 4th and all the other activities that you do throughout the year. That comes out of council that you all direct us on. The education training, that's TML. So we've got money budgeted to go to TML. It won't impact this budget, actually. It impacts next year because it happens in October, right after the implementation of the new budget year. But you'll see the similar amount budgeted for next year as well. So then we talked about historical tax rates. Again, concept here was just to give you an idea of kind of what tax rates have done since 2011. And the orange bar is your interest and sinking. That's the debt service. The blue bar is your operations and maintenance. You can see that the interest and sinking has basically gone down and to the right. That's because we haven't been issuing more debt and we've gradually been paying it off, so you would expect that would go down and to the right. O&M has increased. It's knocked up a little bit since 2011 to present. And you can see what that rate is to justify that. On the right-hand side is the total tax rate.
And that 2015 is a typo, right? I think the decimal just got moved over one.
Probably.
Okay.
Is it 04? Yeah. It's not. Yeah. It's not correct. What? I know I can't read that. That's why I'm doing this. That's kind of small on my screen. Yeah, I'm sure that's a typo. And the 2020 rate is not correct either. And I did correct this in the other slides. You guys adopted a 495 rate, a 0.495. So that I don't know where I got a 0.5077, but you'll see in my later slides I corrected it and called out the correction. So there's your property and sales tax, just a comparison. Again, we looked at this last time, nothing's changed. The interesting thing about this chart is that they're really close. This is net of the this is property and sales tax. So again, they're pretty close in amounts. You can see sales tax is outpacing property tax, and that's what I would expect, frankly.
Probability is as Alsatian Oaks gets built, it's probably going to flip again.
Yeah, but then it'll probably catch up again over time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So when we add all that construction, Alsatian Oaks alone, when we look at their value, the value that they will bring to the books, it's roughly the same amount that we have on the books now in total value. It's pretty close when you consider the commercial and residential. Residential alone is, I think, 124 million or 150 million. And our total book value is 254 million. So they're going to add a considerable chunk of value as all that gets recognized. Now, a lot of that is locked up in the TERS, and that's our portion of that is locked up in the TERS to pay back the developer for all the improvements they're going to make that the city will benefit from as well. So this is our revenues versus expenditures, and this is the one I started mentioning. It's net of the transfers. And the concept here was just to show you what that looks like. If you didn't consider the utility rate transfers, it's pretty clear that our expenditures have exceeded our revenues in the general fund pretty much every year. This last budget year is when they got closest to being equal. And I'm anxious to see what the next year's slide looks like, because I think, well, I know for a fact, looking at what we proposed, it's going to, the blue line will be considerably above that orange line. We're going to address this issue with this current budget. This is what those transfer amounts were from 2011 to present. So just kind of give you an idea. Again, the high water mark is a little over 900,000. In 2017, I think they hit 932. And then this is what that same slide, 2 slides ago, looks like once you put those transfers in. So that's what that gray line is. And you can see, without the transfers, obviously, we wouldn't have enough money. But once you have them, not only do you have enough money, but you're actually starting to build the fund balance, which is what this slide shows. It shows your increase in fund balance, and this is in the general fund over that same time period. And this is the days of operating overlaid on the top of that. And I think I pointed out last time, there isn't always an increase in the number of days. So if you look at between 2015 and 2016, the blue area increased, right? But the number of days actually went down. The same thing happened from 13 and 14. The blue area increased, but the number of days went down from 167 to 168, and then from 181 to 175. Mm-hmm. That happens because your operating expenditures go up, and your revenues didn't keep pace with the increase on a percentage basis with the increase in expenditure. So I like slides like that because I think they're informative. Audited cash balances, we've looked at this once before as well. We gave you the 2019 one, then we gave you 2020, and I gave them both to you. This is just looking at 2020. This is cash available to spend, that's what I'm calling it, because this is the cash that's not encumbered and it's actual cash dollars. There are a lot of things that are represented as assets that will show up as cash because maybe they're dollars in transit, so they're uncollected. So we don't have the money for them yet, whether it's late bills or fines and forfeitures that haven't been paid through the courts. But we don't know the collection status of those, and I don't count those as cash because I might be able to go borrow against them in a bank, but I can't actually spend them today. So this is spendable money. We'll talk. You'll see this number again later. So what is the takeaway on the current budget? City has strong fund balances. General fund has not been paying its own way. Now, I know we talked about this last time, and Phil didn't, I won't say he took exception to it, but he did explain, look, the utility is there. We, as a city, we took the made the conscious choice that if the utilities were a private, and correct me if I say anything wrong, Phil, if the utilities were a privately run business, they would have profits. And because this isn't a privately run business, it is a municipally owned business, we took what would have been the private profits and we paid them to the city to reduce the tax burden to the city and its citizens, which is perfectly fine. I appreciate that explanation. What we will do going forward is to better recognize what those costs are and what that transfer should be, because we also want to make sure that the utility fund is taking care of its needs from an asset standpoint, from a system standpoint, that's reinvesting in the system. And we don't want to overpay or it's not profit if it isn't being reinvested. Does that make sense? We need to make sure that we're reinvesting in a responsible way. So this is, we then talk, go ahead.
With that in mind, Paul, I think when I've asked that question years ago, I think city staff was a little hesitant to actually, because financially, you can actually, some of those fees are real fees that the city would be entitled to even if we didn't own the utilities. For instance, the conveyance of the land right-of-ways that are the utility poles, things like that. So some of those are real fees, and even though we're not supposed to use profit, some of it's profit. And they never actually wanted to, because they were afraid, I think they were afraid it was going to upset the citizens or something. But to me, the city of San Antonio is quite open about that number, what CPS pays to the city of San Antonio as profit. And as you said, so we can reduce our tax burden. So I like what you're doing, where you're actually showing what, these are actual costs, but this is this transfer that we're transferring just because we own it. I don't think we have to be embarrassed by that.
I don't think so. I hope I didn't imply that we did.
No, I agree what you're saying, I disagree what discussions of yours.
It's not just profit, it's reinvestment too, because we need to have a balance somewhere in order to make improvements and repairs. I mean, you can't just operate on a zero balance budget when you've got utilities, so.
Well, the big thing is, we've talked about this, I've been very candid, and you've been very candid with me about your desire to maintain low rates and low taxes. And I've also been kind of put back at you, okay, that's great, but when we make improvements to the system, that costs money, right? So one of the kind of due diligence process in this budget, and you will definitely see this tonight as you look at the utility funds, was to squeeze out any, what I felt was fluff, any items that were there as a cushion. It wasn't irresponsibility on the part of the department heads. I don't think that they were irresponsible in any way in the past budgets, but I'm trying to be lean and mean on this budget, because when I come to you and say, this is what it's going to cost to fix the system, and here's what it does to our rates, I want to both be able to tell you, look at you in the face and tell you this, and for you to be able to look at your constituents and say, hey, we have tried to trim our cost in the utility funds themselves to be as responsible as we can in those areas, so that we are putting downward pressure on the rate. And what we're looking at, the improvements we're looking at, are indeed the cost, and this is the rate that needs to support it. So, and you really can't, back to what Phil was talking about, you really can't make those decisions as policymakers without the data. You can't say with confidence, here's how much it costs to run a utility system, if you're transferring some nebulous amount of $850,000 or $930,000 or whatever that is. That's money that should and could be reinvested in the system. And that's money that's already being collected on the backs of those ratepayers. It didn't come from anywhere. I mean, it came from them, right? So we need to be able to justify to ourselves, first and foremost, and to the public at large, here's how we're spending our money. Here's where we're spending it. Here's what it costs to run the government. Here's how much each service area costs. And then prioritize that. And to the degree that people say, well, basta, I've had enough, I'm not paying more, then we can say, well, great, where do you want us to cut back? Because you have a clear idea of what those costs are. You know what each service level costs you. You have a clear understanding of how the utilities integrate with the general fund, how they support one another. And so that ideally, like I said, I want to be able to, and I think I've heard the feedback that you are enjoying, you like this process, but I don't do this to appease you. I do it because if I were in your seat trying to make a policy decision, this is the information I would like to have, and this is the order I'd like to see it in. I think it'd be very difficult to make a decision otherwise.
I think that what you're doing is creating a lot of clarity, where before just a transfer, that's a very ambiguous number, and how do you decide what that transfer needs to be? I think that what he's doing is really quantifying it really, really well and saying, this is literally what it costs to run the utility. If somebody else were going to run the utility, this is pretty much what it would cost, what they would have to pay the city to be able to do that. And so you're separating it off as an independent business, and you're giving a lot more insight into where the costs actually are, and looking at it completely separately. I think it does nothing but help clear it up in our minds. To your point, it helps us make decisions a lot better, and it creates more clarity for anybody that we represent.
Well, I don't want to shy away from conversations about costs. Mm-hmm. If anybody has a question or an issue about how much money we're spending on any area for anything, we have nothing to hide. I have nothing to hide. You have nothing to hide. I'll give you all the information, right? Because we should be able to justify that. I know that's an issue, and I know that especially in this day and age, of distrust of government and how people spend their money and what it's being spent on. And if you look at the national budget, we have good reason to question, because talk about fluff. I mean, there's billions of dollars of fluff, right, in certain areas. We don't want to do that on a local level. We want to be as transparent as we can. I know that you all are doing that to support you in that effort, right? So the next item we talked about was kind of the budget process. So that was, yeah, I was about to say that. So we're moving in away from the discussion on the current budget into the budget process for the proposed budget. And it is now 6:12 p.m. Very good. So the 21, where I kind of started was just from general input from you all, is setting some kind of mental goals for myself as I prepared the budget. Adopt a balanced budget, so expenditures do not exceed revenues. That goes back to the slide we looked at earlier. Control the operations and maintenance costs. And some of that had to do with looking at growth. Where could we do things that would allow us to grow without adding additional cost? In order to do that, we really need to build our ability, right? We need to create those, I'm trying to think of the right term. Efficiencies, thank you. Create those internal efficiencies where they're lacking. And so far, the great news is we'll be able to do it at a revenue neutral, or I'm sorry, expenditure neutral, or even deficit, where we've actually been able to reduce expenditure and get better results. So that's some of what I'm proud of. You know, the outsourcing HR and payroll, streamlining that data input and customer service. That goes back to that kiosk. I didn't mention the source of funding for the kiosk, but we've got that return of the CARES Act money that we didn't budget for. It's around $168,000. That's where I'm thinking I'm going to use a portion of that to go buy a kiosk, if that's what y'all would like to do.
Well, I think that the biggest challenge that we're facing, and I commend everybody here for standing up and actually being willing to do this, and you especially. In years past, I don't think they were dealing with the amount of growth, the amount of additional complexity, and the potential impact to us. So we're dealing with not just how do we run the city now, but what does that look like in 5 years? What does that look like in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years? And the efforts that you're doing here that help us smooth that out, it helps us not do, one citizen adds $1, it allows us to gain, it is, what is it called?
More efficient. But,
More, yeah.
I mean, that's what I was trying to struggle for earlier and describe, but.
Scalability, yeah.
Yeah, scalability. I was going to say it's the inversion of exponential. Where you add 10 people, you may need to add a full person, right? But now we don't have to add anybody. We can scale with the growth. So I mean that's at least the goal. That's what I'm trying to position the city for. And part of that's technology enhancements we've talked about, the internal controls that we're talking about, the staffing levels that we're talking about. It's all a part of that.
It's economies of scale. That's what I was trying to think of.
Sure.
Haha.
So I want to provide, I talked about this, I want to provide you all with important data and information and position the city for capital investment. And that's probably one of the biggest pieces that we're going to talk about tonight, and one of the most important is, what level of capital investment do we want to try and achieve? And how much do we think we actually need? So where did it start? It started with this, and we gave them, the department heads, a 5-year look. They actually got all the actual numbers. Then they got their average, the historical average. Sometimes that was good data, sometimes it wasn't because of how things have been moved within the budget. And then we gave them the current year-to-date budgeted number, and we asked them to propose a number in return. They did that. We then took what they proposed, and for about an hour to hour and a half with each department head, sat down, ran through the numbers, and left a lot of red ink, on these forms in a lot of places. I'm not one that we do not believe in a use it or lose it mentality. We want to be frugal with the taxpayers' dollars. So if there's not a need to spend it, we're not going to go spend it. And I make sure I communicate that to the staff, that when they come before me with the budget, they may have a very valid reason to have that budgeted, but they didn't experience that need this year. Well, I don't want them spending it just to go spend it. We talk about their budget adjustments at the end of the year, so we recognize. So I hold them to that bottom number on their budget and say, this is, you shall not exceed basically that bottom number on the budget. But recognizing that sometimes within the year, there are things, unanticipated expenses, whether a vehicle goes out, you budgeted $4,000, well, it's really going to be $6,000 repairs, but you'd budgeted $4,000 in supplies, you only spent $500. Well, there's some extra money. We'll go ahead and move a little bit of that extra money up here, but it doesn't mean you get to go spend a bunch of money on supplies, right? So we have those conversations towards the end of the year, and I think to their credit, they've been thrifty with the city's dollars in that manner. So this is just a summary of our general fund revenues, you'll see revenues at the bottom, 3.3 million. This just hasn't changed from last time. Same amount. I will state that that transfer in, I talked about a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes. I have talked to, from the utility funds to make up that amount of that transfer. They've suggested it in lieu of that, of a pilot, because pilots, the payment in lieu of taxes has to be based on an actual accounting of your asset value, and that asset value depreciates over time, and it will fluctuate. That number can fluctuate greatly depending on how much investment the city makes in the assets in a given year. So if we make a bunch of improvements to water and sewer, their asset value could increase on the books significantly because we're all of a sudden taking these pipes that were basically been completely diminished in value and put a bunch of new value on them. That makes their transfer cost, actually puts the load on that water system in the beginning years. It just makes it fluctuate from year to year. Whereas a flat franchise fee, much like what we just talked about for CPS, of 3.5% to 4%, it gets us in that same ballpark. And it's, as far as the PUC concerned, it's justifiable. It's a normal course of business, and it's a lot less headache from an accounting standpoint, and it's a lot more predictable from a utility management standpoint, because we're in both. We got to wear both hats. We got to wear the city hat, where we need to be able to accurately predict our revenues, and be able to rely on some level on the utility system to help keep the general fund afloat. But vice versa, putting our utility system hat on, we need to be able to predict our expenditures and not be seen as the cash cow for the general fund. So a franchise fee accomplishes both of those for both the utility and the general fund. Yes, sir.
I noticed your Parks Recreation went up about $75,000. What do you anticipate additional revenue there? Do you remember?
Year over year?
Well, just between 21, 22.
It's a big part of it is your league fees. So we have fall football and some of those other league fees that we just some of that, and then some of that's pool and RV. It's a mixture, RV, pool, and the league fees.
And then
and you can dig in the Excel and see that.
Right. Well, then other revenues, does that have to do with transferring?
Those were transfers
related to the personnel expenses that now you're leaving them in the utility areas?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why they decreased.
Okay.
But the remaining amount, I'm trying to think what that remaining amount is. I'd have to go look.
Okay. Because the other numbers all look, plus or minus pretty close.
Well, we're going to go through that and show you actually, fun one by one. But so this is your expenditures. You'll see that the two circles are the same. That's not by accident. I was balancing the budget. It, of course, will not be exactly dollar for dollar the same when we get at the end of the day. My goal will be to have a little bit more revenue than expenditure, but what that amount will be, I don't know yet. There are two things that we didn't think of. One of them was we were going to go back and capture the retirement, and then the other was, did we actually do a special revenue slide, special fund slide, where we put them all together?
It's there, but I don't know if it's in the presentation. It's in the next hour.
Okay. So I don't think we put it in the slides, but that's okay, because this is budget works number 2 of 3. We'll have another one. So now, this kind of talks about the process, and where's my time? At 6:21 p.m., I'm going to move into the actual proposed budget, the general fund proposed budget. We're going to look at the numbers that have been proposed for each department, et cetera. So this is your total general fund. You'll see that it went down year over year. Again, that's because we are exporting some of our actual direct costs, about $399 or $339,000 of admin costs from the general fund into the utility fund, plus a portion of our IT and legal and some of the other areas where they justly need to pay for. They owe us, right? We already talked about this before, but just a couple of factors that affect the budget. Of course, personnel is the largest expense. We are budgeting a 3% cost of living increase. That's around $51,000 is what it costs the city. When we talk, I didn't put in the slide for retirement, but if you do a 2% match on retirement, you can see that's just, you just take a third out of that number, right? Does that make sense? So divide 51 by 3. That's a rough estimate of what your cost to do that would be, around $32,000 or so, right? Make sense? Yeah.
So we match
34.
2% match on retirement.
If we were to add that, you were asking kind of, what if we looked at that? And I'm going to recommend, again, I didn't prepare it for tonight, we'll do it for the next meeting, but I'm going to recommend that we not do the TMRS, which is an automatic contribution, but that we set up through the 457. We already have 10 people participating in that 457. Some of them are already contributing more than 2%, so we know what that cost will be to us to match that. It's not a lot for those 10 participants. What we would budget for is full participation, but I fully anticipate that we will not have full participation because it will be up to each employee to opt in. There's advantages and disadvantages. If the reason we're doing this is to be a little bit more attractive to employees, then the employees that care about that sort of thing will be attracted to it and come to the city for that reason. I think I shared with you, during in Ennis, I interviewed over 100 employees. 2 knew about the retirement system. They had a 2-to-1, they had the Cadillac, 2-to-1, 7%, COLA, all of it. Only 2 that ever came to work that I interviewed knew about it. One was a police officer, the other was a finance director. So you kind of hope they would know. What that taught me is that even though that is an attractive thing, and a lot of people look and go, geez, that it isn't necessarily what people look at. They look at that salary number, and that's really important. And I don't want to spend the money unnecessarily on part of the city. I want to give it to the people who want it. I mean, if that's your desire, that's what I would advise you to do.
Just asking the question,
So we'll look at that, and we'll look at what the impact of the budget is. But again, the budgetary impact is pretty small if you were to choose to do that.
I think the second thing that an employee looks at, besides first thing, salary, I think, but second thing is their work environment.
Yeah, when they're applying, that's the reason they don't stay. When they're applying, they generally, they'll look at a lot. It's hard to know that as an
Or
employee.
retention, maybe.
Yeah, as retention, it's a big part of that. But I think health insurance is a part of it too. I mean, they're going to look at they're going to look at how much you're paid and how much does health insurance cost.
Health insurance is big.
Well, we pay for the employee. Now, the family coverage here is not cheap. My family's not on it for that reason.
There ain't no family coverage cheap.
Right.
That I know of.
Right there.
So, we were talking about just the different factors that were affecting the budget. Utility fund picking up $393,000 in the cost, that's a big factor. We took out all capital expenditure, not only in this budget, but in the utility fund budgets as well. That was a big factor. And then, as I said before, there are no service level adjustments, meaning no new services, no new employees in the general fund. And I'm distinguishing that because when we get to utility funds, that's
Are
not
there
the same.
any reductions?
Yes, there is one reduction, and that would be in HR, and I think I talked about this. There's a reduction in the cost, whether or not it'll actually result in one less employee is yet to be determined, but that's part of how we're paying for that payroll, because that
For the
person is currently
contracting
doing
service.
payroll and AR, and after we outsource payroll, we don't need someone who does both those things, and we don't need someone who's experienced in HR necessarily, because we'll have that outsourced. So we'll just need a person who's able to do AR or accounts payable. That's a good question, Albert. So no capital, no SLAs, no new positions, no new pieces of equipment, et cetera. We were talking about expansion on the animal control earlier. That would be what I consider an SLA. If that were a service level adjustment, if that's something that we want to look at, is improving the animal services department by providing a facility or more people or whatever, if it's a cost item that we're not doing today, that's what, and this is just so that we're on the same page. In my language, that's called a service level adjustment. So if that's something that you all want to consider, again, I'm proposing basically a staff budget. It's your job as a policymaker to decide whether that's appropriate or not. And I just help you understand, well, okay, what's the cost and that kind of thing. So this is just a look at the adopted versus proposed by department. I'm sorry, By department. It threw me off, so I'll look at transfers first. And what you'll see is that the blue line is the current budget, and it's going to be longer in almost every case because the proposed budget is indeed cheaper, especially on the personnel side, because again, we transferred out all those costs. We did reduce in some areas where we felt like we could. So contracted services reduced a little bit, education and training. We still have plenty of money in there for education and training, but we don't have as much as we originally budgeted in this budget here. And you can kind of see that as we go through each fund. So this is, again, the general fund, each department. This is general fund by those major categories. You've already seen this. You saw it last time, but you also have already seen it in this presentation. This is just looking at it on a year-by-year comparison, current budget versus proposed. There's your personnel expense, obviously huge reduction because of the transfer to utility fund. Supplies, increase in supplies. That's emergency management. So just creating a line item. We talked about this last time of $6,000. Don't ask me what it's for. It's really just there as a placeholder. So that as we talk about emergency management, we'll have some funds there, and then we can do with them as we need. Swim team uniforms, $10,000. Sorry, that's offset by revenue, and then an anticipated increase in fuel and oil of about $4,500. So that's what those increases are in supplies. Purchase services, again, it's a reduction. Contracted services, a reduction. Education and training, again, we reduced slightly. Technology was reduced from what we spent year over year. Repairs and maintenance, a little bit higher. Miscellaneous, again, reduced in part because I shared with you before, I have some, odious is the wrong word, but
Find a category.
yeah, I prefer to categorize it as much as possible. There's your capital outlay. Obviously went to zero because we don't have any more. And then there's your transfers out, and they're basically the same. So that's debt service and that kind of thing. So what are some potential service level adjustments? We talked about this before. An economic development director, personally, I think that would be a little early. Certainly October 1, we wouldn't have any direction for that type of a person. But just things to think about if you wanted to budget some amount of money for some point in time in the future. Tourism director, additional labor in police, parks, streets, anywhere else in the general fund. And then new streets equipment. We talked briefly about an asphalt zipper. I think there may be a presentation about that in the report from Parks and Streets on the July 27th meeting. I know that we're going to go look at a demo. But these were the thoughts that I had as I prepared this workshop last time. Have you had any thoughts since our last meeting about other SLAs? I heard one earlier tonight, animal control improvements potentially.
Well, in animal control, by the way, it's just, I don't know what we're doing now.
Right.
We need to do anything.
Right, okay. Anybody else have any other areas in the general fund specifically where you feel like we need to enhance services, we need more people, we need to be doing something different?
The only thing I would say, the way that you're approaching this, I think you're right. I don't think we're ready for these yet, but we need to be thinking about these. We talk about a tourism director. It could also be a tourism council. It kind of just depends on, I think that we need to provide really good direction for what kinds of things do we feel like the people that we represent want. Do they want tourism? Do they, that really is a choice. Do you want to bring tourism? Are people okay with that? It's a financial benefit to the city.
I think we need to look, you haven't been here for the last 10 years, but if we look back as little as, I would say, 5 years ago, we went down this road. We had both an economic development director and a tourism director. We restructured the city staff so we could do it. And then a year later, we did away with it. So we really need to look at that and learn what we did and what did we expect that we didn't see because we did away with both of them the next year.
Who is the tourism?
Yes.
Well, originally, we had a economic development coordinator, and the
Right,
director,
position.
and she was also the tourism rep. And then
They
we-
weren't these titles, but they're same job.
Right, and then we had Claudia Mora, and she came in and she was part-time airport manager, tourism, and economic development, because they spread her out.
But I think that got.
And she was the
I think
last
you're
one.
right. I think that got,
It didn't work.
well, I don't know that it didn't work. I think it got caught up in the slash and burn budget cycle that got rid of a couple of people that I really think were actually important to have here. But
And then
that's the thing, that we've got to be on the same page with that. If you don't believe it, we should. And like, we don't have to figure
No,
out.
I'm not expressing an opinion, I'm just saying, I think it's important when we get to that point where we start talking about it,
Yep.
that we review what we just did, because our citizens are going to remind us that we just did this,
Mhm.
and it didn't work. And then we did away with it, and now we're doing it again, if we do it.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
I
I'm not
think,
arguing the merits.
I think we need to look at bringing, getting a K-9 back here. We used to have a K-9, and the handler spouse got new orders, so they PCS'd, and they didn't train a new officer to become the new K-9 handler, so we lost the K-9.
But we had
And
one
with-
since then.
Huh?
We had another one after that.
Right,
And he was
but-
San Antonio.
But we need to have one permanently because we're growing. The illegals coming up,
Can you make a note, K-9?
all the drugs,
That's all.
illegal drug trafficking and everything. The drug, we need to look at adding a K-9 unit back to our police department.
Good call.
Okay.
Parks and streets. I mean, I don't know if Devin can keep up with all the in-house drainage projects we can do. I mean, you talked about issues in your respective districts on flooding or drainage. Country Village, I think personally, I mean, I haven't heard from anybody in any of my constituents, but my opinion is in pretty good shape, but it could be better if we just do some of that stuff like they're doing on Constantinople, just clean stuff up, clean stuff out. But
Do you
just doesn't
think-
have enough,
You're just making me think about this.
what?
How much work do you think there is, drainage work, and I'm asking a serious question, I don't know the answer to. I think I know, but I'm not sure. How much work do you all think there is in drainage? Could you justify a full-time position, or even two, that just did drainage year-round in Castroville?
No. I mean, Devin picked up an extra person last year in streets, and he picked up an extra person in parks, and hopefully he's using those in both areas, depending on what gets busy, doesn't. But I mean, I think the drainage issues that Herb's talking about, in my mind, are capital.
Oh, no doubt.
Maybe.
Well,
And it's not just little bitty stuff.
I look around and I see how much maintenance hasn't been how many things haven't been maintained.
Right.
And I really don't, I'll lean on our department head and our
I think you could
streets
justify
crew.
it. Just some.
I don't know that you
Belong
could justify
year-round.
two, but I think you could just about justify one or 3/4 of one, because if that person, if they checked in, first off, what doesn't get measured doesn't get done, right? And what isn't funded isn't, I mean, if you don't have it as a specified service, it's not gonna get looked at. It's gonna be kind of set aside, like, when we get this, but we do have parks,
plus,
we have
when you're not-
streets. We don't have a drainage department, a person whose job it is to look at drainage and nothing else. I'm wondering if this city, and I've never done this anywhere else, but when you look at the history of this city and its location and the drainage issues it faces, and the fact that you don't have bar ditches, you have specific, like, you've got what are arguably, I don't know if they're really intended to be specifically drainage outlets. I'm certainly some of them were, but I don't know all of
The
the streets
streets?
were. I'm thinking of paper streets.
Sure. Oh.
But some of those paper streets, if you just had a drainage person that their job was to clear out all the drainage and maintain it year-round, that is a job, that's as big a job, I think, as parks maintenance. And we have an entire crew to do parks. We don't have anybody doing drainage. I just think about it as Todd brought it up.
Well, and
No,
the other thing
that's
is
why I brought it
that
up.
if you're not doing it as O&M, you're going to do it as capital. So if you wait and you defer, suddenly you've got a big project. I think what you're suggesting we look at is, how do we do it consistently
Maybe
over
you
time?
contract it out.
I think that's the key point. I think when we get to the discussion about capital, my personal opinion is you're going to change, your mind's going to get twisted, because I think what you're going to learn is some of this stuff should be in O&M, and it should be being done by the people we have now with the proper equipment, proper supervision, and some of it's capital. It's going to be split. But I have a feeling when the discussion is over, you're going to want to revisit O&M and probably look at a service level adjustment in streets and drainage. Right now, drainage is, who does it belong to right now? John or?
No, it's Devin. Devin has parks and streets and
So
drainage.
it's, I think when the discussion has been had, I think it's going to be a very emotional, lively discussion, and I think there's going to be some repercussion that we're going to want to think about. But I think it's going to be on both sides.
Well, I agree with you, yeah, there's definitely some capital.
The question you asked was, do we need to add a person? And I really think that if we did add a person, that person would be very, very busy for a year. And then if we did maintenance after that, it wouldn't be that bad. But I think at this point, we could easily keep somebody busy for a year, just clearing out drains and putting channels back into the condition that they were intended to be in. Country Village has got lots of drains, but they're overgrown and they're silted up. You know, you've got lakes in those cul-de-sacs where they should be emptying into the drain. And all over the city, the situation
Well,
is the same.
yeah, like you said, I think you keep someone busy.
Not just in Country Village, but you have curbs. See, that's the problem.
Yes.
But most of the city doesn't have curbs, so you don't build up that reservoir in the cul-de-sac.
Well, you look at, so the new development of Country Village is going in, there is a drainage culvert that goes, it's on the west side of the property, it then turns and goes east, and then goes parallels to 90 along the south side of that new development, headed east, back behind the car wash and behind the bank, behind those other things. It hadn't been cleaned out, it's silted in by about a foot.
And there's vegetation in there too.
And there's a similar one as you go down Houston, same thing. There's one there that we built. I've seen the pictures when it was first installed, and I promise you that's probably still thin by at least a foot.
the culverts on Mexico
But once
Street
you
are
clean
3
that
foot.
out,
Yeah.
that's why I was asking. I was kind of
And the
sincere about
alleyway
saying,
behind,
is there
Helen.
is there
Same thing.
enough work?
Same way too.
Once you catch up, is there still enough work? And I think there might be. I think
Well,
there
the
just
only
about
other
is.
thing-
I think we
Think
definitely
about.
need to have
Yeah,
that
yeah.
discussion.
Yeah.
Is that this
for
is
sure.
all under Devon, and Devon has 3 people in parks that mow throughout the summer. But in the wintertime, we're not mowing hardly as much.
Yeah.
In fact, and those people would be able to be used to clean this up,
If they
because
have
they're
the-
all doing their other.
If they have the right tools.
And then some, if they have the right tools, and then also some of these projects, I think we can contract out. Because if you hire a person, like you say, after a year, it's hard to get rid of that person.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go out and okay, we're gonna subcontract someone to do this work here.
And they've got all the tools and the
They got the
experience.
tools, they can haul it away, they got the equipment, and it's just a short-term, quick.
Right.
The problem that I have about discussing headcount right now is that we still haven't identified exactly what needs to happen.
No.
So I think that we need to go through this process of determining, actually looking at what needs to happen, identify those items, and then we come back and say, all right, so how much of that can we do in-house? How much of that will be persistent? What does the maintenance look like on that? And I think that I do believe that once we get through that we could justify that and maintain the drainage so that it doesn't get out of hand again.
Well, I bring it up in part because I want us to think about workloads now. You know, you talked about the fall mowing. Well, yes and no. I agree with that. And again, I've only been here since January, so give me a full year working with staff and see what they do and what their priorities are, et cetera. But beyond that, when you look at what some of the things that they're talking about in parks, they're talking about replacing the irrigation. The irrigation system we have out there doesn't work. It's a neat concept because you take effluent water and you water your fields with it. But in practice, we have spent more money on replacing irrigation equipment, the heads and lines. We could have put in a new unit at least 3 or 4 times now. That's literally, Devin said he's replaced more heads in his little time here than he did, for a city that had way more sprinklers, way more issues. He's done more here in a very short period of time. And I think that's just because of the type, what we're doing with the water and how it's coming in. And there's solutions. Could you filter that water before it gets in the first place? Could you pump it up into a storage tank so you just treat it like a water and then you have some pressure? Because it's not pressurized. That's the other problem. When it gets into that system, I've had complaints about dry spots. Well, some of that's because the head's broken, some of it because it's clogged up, some of it's because there's no pressure. And when we do get water, it's completely, because we can't control when the farmer does their irrigation, so we don't know when we're getting water and when we're not. So there's no consistency on the fields, which means you can't have a consistent, reliable product to offer to the people playing on the fields. So anyway, I think that actually I know that there's discussion within parks to make improvements to all of that, which will naturally affect how often we mow. Once you have good fields with predictable grass growing seasons, you're planting winter rye, and you're pretty much mowing all year. And you're maintaining those fields. And it's okay because it's offset by field revenue. I mean, but point is, I think the mayor made a great, that's why I threw this out for discussion. I know it's premature, but I want us to talk about it because I think, to one of your point, once we do the analysis, it's very possible we'll come back with some SLAs, I think it was her, SLAs in the future in this area. But I don't want us to not have that conversation now just because it's a little premature. So I appreciate the feedback, that was very helpful. So anything else? Again, we have another proposal. Once this gets adopted, it's adopted. You can amend it, but the idea, hopefully, we can get our rates right. We can do plan accordingly so that anything we really think we want, I don't want us to adopt it in October and in November come up with this new thing we need. So capital funding, generally that's going to be, the general fund, it's going to be tax supported, and then the utility fund will be rate supported. Both pay debt service with, can or have the ability to pay debt service with fund balance reserves. The 2220 audited cash on hand, these are the numbers that were missing from the slide last time I did this, but there's your general fund. I said you'd see it again. It's $3,152,476. It's a little over 300 days of operating in the current budget. That's a lot of days. Utility fund is $3,719,884. Here's your cost to issue debt. So when we talk about, I told you I want to the most important thing I think in this budget is to position you with the ability to go issue debt if you so chose. So you issue $1 million in debt, and these are conservative numbers. I fully anticipate that if we were to go out to the market today, it probably wouldn't be $72,000 for $1 million. It might be something less, but this is a good number to use because it'll definitely be something close. So $1 million, for every $1 million you go and borrow, you're going to pay $72,000 a year on a 20-year note. Some of the things we might go borrow money for, you might want to do a 30-year because that's the life expectancy of the thing. So a new plant, for instance, a new water tower, that kind of stuff, you might put on a little bit longer term. Under the current property tax rate, it's around $22,000 per penny. So you've levied 49.5 cents in taxes. That produces $1 million plus in revenue. It's around $22,000 in revenue per penny. So how many pennies does it take to cover $72,000 or $1 million? Well, it's around 3 and 3.2, right? 3 1/3 pennies to cover that debt. I showed this to you last time, but I had the wrong numbers in there. I've crossed them out. So if I make changes, generally I'm going to try to do it in this fashion, so you can see what I showed you and see the correction rather than just replace the numbers. But yeah, it's really, the O&M is really, instead of 47, it was 0.4633. The total rate's not 50 cents, it's 0.495. And your INS portion of that's around 3 cents. It's actually, I think, 0.033. Or 3.01, I can't remember. Our total value, I mentioned it before, is $224 million. We anticipate, we've already been given kind of the initial number of what this is worth. I did have your INS and O&M on here before, but I took the numbers off because it's the arrows that matter. So when you see an increase in assessed property value, what naturally happens to your O&M rate and your INS rate is that they'll go down. Doing nothing else, you're gonna assess a lower property tax, and that's all this slide is meant to convey. Now, based on our conversation from the last meeting, the next few slides are all going to be brand new, and this is again to give you some feedback in areas that you've requested. So, what is the assumed tax rate? So when I put in a property tax revenue estimated amount, it's based on a tax rate. I don't know what that tax rate is necessarily. I'm just using my best guess as to what that amount is. Until we get the certified values, it's really a guessing game anyway. I'm going to send out, for grins and giggles, I'm going to send you out the worksheet. I would put some Excedrin next to you before you, or as you read it. It is like doing your personal business taxes. It's very much like that, where you've got to go through all these complicated formulas to figure out what number goes in this one slot. And then you go down to the next slot, and then you go through some formula to figure out what goes there. And then you subtract that one from the one above it, and then you take the greater of, and you do all that. It's that kind of stuff. And it is pretty complicated. And I misspoke earlier over lunch. It's not our appraisal district. The county actually has a tax office that supports us and does that. The appraisal district just does the appraisals, and then the tax office helps us do that for them. But I did use just some big fat finger math, right? Just big estimates. And I cannot stress enough that this is hypothetical. It's not actual. The rates are just a wild guess, but a pretty scientific wild guess as to what this rate might be were we to leave things as is. So the current proposed budget assumes no capital. I've already kind of made that abundantly clear, but I'm clarifying that now. It also assumes a reduction in your expenditures because we moved some of it over to the utility fund. So naturally, we don't need as much money as we would in the past. The actual amount of money went up slightly to balance that fund, because keep in mind, it wasn't balanced before with the transfer. So there's still a little bit of money needed from the tax rate, right? But your increase, so the total increase is 30 million. That's the estimated right now. We'll see what the certified number is. Usually your estimated is a little bit lower. At least that's been my experience pretty much every year. Usually it's a little bit lower, so I expect this to go up from here, which means the rates that I'm showing you will actually go down, right? But the proposed tax revenue was that I have built into the model. If you go back and look at property tax revenue on the general fund summary form on that spreadsheet, it's one of the very first tabs on the spreadsheet. If you go pull that up, it's 1,168,333. That equates to what I'm guessing is about a 0.458 rate. So why is that rate important? Because it's lower than the current rate of 0.495. That's the only takeaway I wanted to show you. It matches with what I was showing before. It will necessarily be lower, and this is my best estimate at what that lower rate would be as of, without running that worksheet. So what is that? How is that made up? Well, it's going to be made up of two components, your O&M and your INS. And again, these are fat finger numbers. INS around 0.026, O&M around 0.432, for a total rate of 45 cents, almost 46 cents. So tax rate options, we talked about this last time. You do nothing. Don't issue any new debt. Don't spend any capital you do invest in. Just use your cash that we talked about that you have on hand. You'll end up with a lower rate. Last meeting I said it was about 47 cents. I think it's actually lower. It's around 46. And you continue to spend fund balance as you have done. I don't advise it simply because I don't think it's a responsible way to look at your sustainable way is what I would say. Maybe not responsible. It's not a sustainable way to look at financing the city. It'll work in the short term. You've got some money in the short term, but long term, probably not a recipe for success. You can also preserve the historic tax rate. Now, the historic tax rate, I'm actually pointing to either this year's rate. I mean, you can call anything you want. In a next slide, you'll see I picked the highest rate within the last 3 years as the historic tax rate. That was done for convenience because we need as much money as we can for capital, and you'll see why in a minute. Or we could raise the rate to accommodate larger investment. So just keeping in mind that the INS portion of the rate does not count towards that rollback. That's what they used to call it. They call it something else now. So I put this slide together just as an illustration. The 458 represents no new capital, no new investment, and then each of those rates above it are just the old rates. So 0.495 is what it was in 2021, 0.507 is what it was in 2020, 0.5233 is what it was in 2019, and this is what I'm kind of calling the historic rate, because we could point to it and say, hey, this used to be the rate, and we really probably should have kept it at that rate if we wanted to make the capital investments that are needed by the city. This is what those rates produce, nice and big. So that's the rates again. 456 is doing nothing. You can see the debt amount. There's no debt issued because there's no money to pay for the debt, right? You can't go issue debt with fund balance if you have no plan to raise the rate in the future, right? The 496, again, keep in mind, ballpark estimates. This is hypothetical. These are not intended to be exact numbers. They're just guesswork using the numbers we have from the appraisal district. Your tax revenue would be around, slightly higher, about $1 million more, a little bit less than $1 million more. That would allow you to go issue about $1.3 million in debt. I said $1 million. Did I say it? I meant to say 100,000. Just a little less than $100,000. And remember, what did it cost to issue per million? $72,000. So that's all I'm doing is I'm taking that difference and dividing by 72,000 to get how many million? Well, it'd be 1.3 million. Just use that number. And then if you went with 52 cents, you're talking about 2.3 million. That's how much debt service you could pay for every year if you didn't do anything else with that property tax. And so we're talking about building capacity to go and issue debt. As your property values increase, if you just left the rate flat and left that INS alone, so the INS portion is what would gain instead of the O&M. Remember we looked at it before, the INS was doing this, the O&M was doing this. If you could make it so that the INS was gaining instead of the O&M, or at least have the INS gaining at the same rate, that really is what empowers a city to go and do capital investment. So any city that's out there doing projects on a consistent basis, they're going to have a plan that is reflective of this, mirrors this on some level. This is what your cost, and I know this is really important to our taxpayers. It's certainly important to me. I plan to live here. I know all of you already do. You all pay taxes. I certainly plan on paying those same taxes. So it is important. If you just kept the rate the same, obviously there's no net increase in the payment of taxes. If you were to increase it to that 4.496, so you left the rate alone, what you have today, it'd be about a $37 increase per year on per $100,000. So if your home is worth less than $100,000, according to the appraisal district, then you're going to pay something less than that $37. For every $100,000 it's worth, it's going to go up by $37. And if you were to adopt that 0.52 rate, obviously that cost per 100,000 is around $523, and your net increase is about $64 per 100,000. I wanted to look at, y'all also asked
I had
about
a question about, and I think we talked about that the other day, about what percentage of our ratepayers are frozen by their taxes?
Yeah. Yes, you did ask that, and I didn't make a note. Help me remember to do that, please.
I mean, because that could
it's
factor
not a huge percentage because I looked at numbers.
Yeah.
I mean, because I just looked at what our freeze amount is, and so our freeze is only reduced by like $24 million or so, is what I recall. I could have that. I could have that reversed. It could be 42 million, but either way, on a $254 million value, it's maybe 10% is what and I think that's what I said in the meeting last time. It's around 10 to 15% is what I would anticipate, and I think it's I don't believe it's any higher than that. I think it's around 10 to 15.
The military people in here.
And there's only
Leroy,
7 that are 100%.
Can you grab that information? You may already have it. Do you have that?
They don't pay taxes. Only
the
7
certified
of us.
roll? Okay.
So,
Well, that's not just.
Yeah, and I just want to know the freeze value
yeah, that's probably-
and then the total
But
value.
that's not only frozen, there are other.
Sorry,
frozen.
I did not hear her comment.
Age categories.
Oh, yeah.
So you're saying that there's only 7 disabled
Or
vets?
veterans that
Right.
are 100%.
Right.
Sorry,
100%.
100%. Thank you.
Right.
I mean, I'm 60.
Yeah.
I don't
Right.
count in that number.
Yeah, there's a freeze.
60% of the tax.
So disabled veterans receive, they get it's basically waived, right?
Well, disabled veterans, it's depending on the percentage of disability that they're
Okay.
identified as.
Okay.
If they're 100%, they don't pay any property taxes.
Right.
And there's only 7 of us
Right,
at that rate.
Thank you for that clarification.
right.
Can we take a recess for 5 minutes?
Absolutely.
So there's been a request to recess?
All right, let's take a recess at 7, I've got that, 6:57.
Analog clocks, boy.
May I make a motion that we put a digital clock up there?
There you go.
Ow.
That wouldn't be a bad plan.
Yes, so everybody sees
Let's
it.
flip to a countdown clock.
Ding, time's up.
Have it attached to a little bundle of,
You get to babysit us today, huh?
thank you.
That's our new officer, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
newest.
have you found the spreadsheet that he's talking about, he sent us? Because I can't find it.
I think last week it was supposed to be in the, what was it, the.
The
I want to try to open it up,
I'm
yeah.
in there, but I don't-
Trouble anyway, didn't
I'm
I?
still trying to make that district-wide, that district email, District 4 email. I think I sent it to you today.
Oh, did you?
CC'd you.
I was really
Yeah, I
impressed.
got a folder that has the
I'd like it with-
2022 budget,
Yeah, I got it,
2022
yeah.
budget, but it's
Yeah, no
only
problem.
I
got.
struggled bad. I had to go visit Herb twice.
Nice. Well, I'm glad that he's helping you through that, and I'm glad that you're taking advantage
No,
of
I
it.
just think that's a good thing.
It's a great way to communicate.
Yeah, exactly. I've been wanting to do that for a long time.
Are you cold? No? Okay.
Oh, it
It
feels
just blows straight over
good.
to me.
Because when I get home, it's gonna be 80 degrees. That's all my wife will let me turn it down to.
Wow.
See, we have the opposite problem. Joe comes upstairs, it's freezing cold up here. Chris and I, no, we're comfortable.
At my house it's 72, but this one is.
72?
Yeah, it's
Oh
79.
my God.
I keep a blanket in the living room.
At night,
Also,
it's
I
dream of
68 to
that,
70.
But this blows straight over to me, and that's fine.
But that's also a brand new house. My utility bill is literally half of my old house on the new house.
Nice.
I actually got my wife a little bamboozled because I programmed my, I programmed my thermostat.
She's listening, don't you, Tom?
She's watching something else. At about 10 o'clock at night, it drops to 77. That's the best I can do.
No, I was telling my husband, put another blanket on.
That's what, that's
But I
what we
can
told
live
him.
with 77 and a ceiling fan.
We're 76 in the ceiling fan at night and 78 during the day.
No, 70. But
In
upstairs
the
it's
summer.
75. So,
Yeah, upstairs when we're not at home, we have it.
my house stays
the
very, very
nest.
cool. I mean, it's
I
well
don't even go look.
You got a unit at the bottom, a unit at the top?
Yeah, the Nest system during the day when nobody's upstairs, it's set to about 75. And then about 4 o'clock, we start shutting, lowering it that way because, you know, we're starting to come home and everything cool off upstairs.
Yeah, we put a mini split. We've got the 2 bedrooms upstairs. We put a mini split in one. It works great. I'm going to put a mini split in the other one and close off those and reduce, because I'm going to have to replace my AC. So I'll reduce the size of the.
Yeah, we got to do that with our downstairs.
I did that with my office.
Yep.
And
Those
I
mini
put the other,
splits are pretty nice.
Very
put the
efficient,
second
too.
unit in the garage.
If you, Jimmy Keller is getting some out of Mexico.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
Perfect job.
He's the one that got
Middle of
ours.
the summer,
Oh, he did?
Yeah, he's
It's
great.
100 degrees outside.
You guys ready?
It's 80 inside that garage. That's great. Once I close it up.
All right, we're going to return from recess at, yes, I know, 7:01. See, I got it right once.
3 minutes.
I'm learning.
That was an efficient recess. In answer to your question, Commissioner, or Councilmember Shearhart,
Close enough.
we,
They all know each other.
the freeze taxable amount, we're talking about just the over 65. We're going to call it 48 million. This is in the 2021 preliminary, so I said it's 24 or 42, 48 in the new year. That's of a market value of 339 million. Now, 339 is before all the net stuff's taken out. That's why we're using 254. 254 takes into account this freeze, it takes into account all the other stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So 254 is the net, if I didn't make that clear before.
Because like churches and everything else, they don't.
Right, yeah, so 254 is the net, and this is the estimated net. So, not a final number by any stretch, but it is a conservative estimate, what we think it is. What's not likely to change is that market value number, the 339. That's probably pretty close to accurate. It's just how much comes out in the wash at the end of the day. Let me turn that off.
I think they're still having hearings. I don't know when the end of the hearing process ends. End of June?
I don't know. I know I think they can contest them all the way after we adopt.
Or last week, excuse me.
Yes, yeah.
Because I know that there's a carry forward on the worksheet from the prior year. So I think they can continue to do some form of contesting.
Protest?
Yeah,
Yeah,
protest.
they put a deadline on the protest applications, but depending on how many they get, they keep having hearings.
Right.
Oh, really?
So again, where we left off was just kind of what the impact of these increases that we looked at would be to our ratepayers. So that top line, that's about $52 or $523. $64 per year. Thank you. That's about $64 a year is that top green line. And it's a little over $2 million in borrowed funds. Remember I gave you some ideas. We don't know, and I'm going to stress this again, I think I mentioned earlier tonight. I'm not trying to decide how to spend the money. I think that there's more than enough uses. I do want us to distinguish between the utility fund and the general fund. Utility fund, we're going to, when we do that, we're paying someone right now to do that cost of service study. They are taking into account a responsible approach to capital investment on behalf of the utilities. So they're going to come up with some ballpark figure based on our existing capital need that we've already outlined, that engineers over the years have assessed and evaluated, that sort of thing. So that's why I say I'm not worried about utility fund. It's going to happen. We'll get plenty of data to decide on that. On the general fund side, these are just general fund projects. So this is facilities, parks, streets, maybe drainage. Drainage has a little bit of its own source of income through an impact fee and some other things. So when we think about that, we talked about facilities. There's not a huge need in facilities immediate anyway. Immediate need really is for streets. And I suggested to you all that we could easily do $2 million worth of streets repair each year for the next while and still have streets and drainage to do. Because when you do a street repair, it's not always just streets, right? There's streets and drainage improvements that are done at the same time. I mean, it adds up pretty quickly. But we talked about how you could slice that pie if you were thinking about on an annual basis, how would we spend that $2 million? Well, some of it could be in parks, $250,000, $500,000. Some of it could be on drainage, $250,000, $500,000. Some of it could be on streets, $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million. I'd say I think anything less than $1 million, you're not one, in order to get contractors and get good rates, you've got to be spending some money. When we spend $200,000 at a time, we're going to get contractors, but we're not going to get $200,000 worth of work, and we're not going to get the best look at some of the best contractors. No dig on any of the contractors that are participating today. I'm sure there's some good ones in that group, but you get a better class of candidates when you have bigger projects. That's just the way the world works, right?
It takes just as
So
much
the
to
more money
mobilize
you can, what's that?
It takes just as much to mobilize everybody on a $200,000 contract as it does on a $1 million contract.
Exactly.
True.
And those contractors were looking for the bigger projects. So that's why I'm urging you I'm really pushing streets, because I know that's the easiest place for us to look at. Everybody drives them, we can see the quality of them, we just establish what is our standard that we want to try to meet, and what does that standard cost. And we don't have to do that before we adopt a rate. We just have to have an idea of what that cost is. So that's kind of what the goal of all this is. So then one of the other questions this is comparison of tax rates. I think that was also one of the things that was asked in the last meeting. You see Bexar County on the right, and then on the left is Medina County. The takeaway for me when I looked at these lists is that...
73 in Italian? Are you kidding me?
Wow.
Holy
A third of the cities in Bexar County is over 50 cents. It's kind of hard to pick them out, but there's 8 out of the 24 that are over 50 cents. And then half of the cities in Medina County are already over 50 cents, if you want to think about it that way.
Alamo Heights. no,
Hondo-
they live over there.
Hondo is really flirting. I mean, they're at .494. It'll be interesting to see what they choose to do. But as I stated to the mayor, I honestly, my values as just as a Texan, I don't like paying taxes. I think if you play the game of, well, what's the neighbor doing versus what do we need and what's our mission, aim, and objective, what are we trying to achieve, you don't want to be on a race to the bottom, right? I think that's a wrong way to look at it. But certainly looking at it from a standpoint is what's important to us, what's important to our community. And low taxes are part of it, but part of it's also how do we invest in it and what do we consider to be our level, our standard of care. That goes back to our streets.
Yeah, I know.
I saw that. Did y'all see the highest one? Somerset, 75?
Yeah.
I think that's the highest one.
Yeah,
Which one?
Somerset?
Somerset.
And Kirby's right behind that.
Natalia, 73, I can't
So-
believe
But
it.
let's
The
look
city-
at property values in Somerset.
Where I was an interim, their tax rate, I don't want to lie. Was it $1? I think it was
First one there,
$1.
it's 8 cents.
They're 50,
Great Forest.
they're a larger population, 5,500 people, their tax rate was $1, and the sad part for them was there was nothing to show for it. They had half the tax base we do, though. Their tax base was 124 million, so they had to get more money to pay. And their entry level for street crews, $10 an hour. Couldn't get, literally, we'd have applicants that would come in and every one of them would fail a drug test. Like, we could not get anybody of any value to come in and work for the city. It was a real challenge, and they didn't have, anyway, I feel for the person who's going to take that job because it's going to be, they have some real financial challenges there. But the point is, it's not, the only reason I bring that up is, it's not about the rate. You know, it's that community had virtually nothing to show for it. They had an excellent park, a park to die for, great pool, beautiful surroundings. So I think that was just one crowning jewel. This is in Breckenridge, Texas. You can go look it up and see. I thought it was beautiful, but beyond the park, there wasn't much to write home about. The streets were in terrible condition. Housing stock was diminishing. It was just a bad place. So you really have to think, what are our standards? And then, you know, I'll do my best to tell you, okay, well, here's what it costs to meet that standard, and we can debate that. We can have fruitful conversation about, well, is this the right price or is it this? I think the city is paid for its past sins in this regard, in that the city has attempted to value engineer projects in the past, and they've paid for it. They've ended up paying more than what they wanted to pay to begin with, ended up with a project that wasn't as high quality as they wanted to start with.
It ends up costing more than they originally.
Right, so getting it right to start with, what is our standard, and then what does that standard cost?
Well, and I think that, I do believe that it's important to look at this as a part of a standard of living. So part of that standard of living, to your point, is quality of streets. Part of that is reliability of the utility system. Part of it is having broadband or not. You know, these are all different things that I think that we look at every single one and say, this is where we really shine. This is where we are, you know, maybe behind some of the other ones, but we've made these conscious decisions, and this is where we are. So I think that it's really important to take a look at this as a part of the whole.
Well, and hopefully, the survey that I'll provide you the survey instrument, you can take a look at it and give me some feedback, but the survey instrument that we come up with to ask the citizens about will get at some of these things too, things as well. It'll help you understand where is their mind. Because we all think we know, at least, the more you get to know the community, the more you think you know what people want. But doing that survey work is what really kind of tells you how close to the mark you are. And sometimes you can be surprised by what people say they want, what they're willing to pay for. And that's where the biggest surprise, in my 10 years I've been doing this, the biggest surprise to me has been people's willingness to pay for things. Because we have a lot of heartache, and I have a lot of heartache about raising taxes, raising rates. But when you ask people are they willing to pay for it if they get a specified result, a majority of the time, I won't say a rate, but a majority of the time, people are willing to trust in their government to do the right thing. But then the onus is on us to deliver. So I hope that that's kind of our end game as we start the capital planning piece. But again, this was something y'all requested. Another item was inflation. This wasn't during the meeting, but after the meeting, one of the council members came. What's that?
Can you blow that up?
No, because I'll tell you why in a second. Because it doesn't matter. One of the after the meeting, I was approached about kind of how is inflation impacting the budget. And we talked a little bit about during the meeting. We guessed that the rate was around 5%. It's actually closer to 6 right now. But what I wanted to show you, basically the takeaway is, there's a bunch of items that they track, a lot, right? The Bureau of Labor and Statistics, yeah. Well, and each one of these is an index of its own. So you can't really read them, but there's medical and there's, services areas and, I mean, there's commodities broken up in different groups. And each one of these, this is just one list, and this is the aggregated list. There's actually literally like 1,000 that you can choose from, different baskets where you can really drill down. And economists and analysts they'll go into specific market areas and really track how spending is going and how employment is growing in a particular area. And all that's done through the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. But again, I just showed you to kind of give you an idea that when we talk about a CPI, it's not one number, right? I'm going to tell you what number we're going to use, but truthfully, there's a number of different CPIs, right? And I just wanted to be transparent.
The first line, the very first line from the department shows you the urban.
Right, and that's this.
The very first line.
Right, and that's this. So this is
today. It was announced it's 5.4.
Right.
As of today, for average for the year.
Well, and actually, I'm going to drive a little bit deeper because I don't know what I'm looking at is actually the CPIU. That's all urban for the South region of Texas for June 2008 to June 21. So this specific graph, this specific set of data, the CPI, if you looked at all urban for national, would be different, and it'd be different for the whole state of Texas, and it might be different for DFW compared to South Texas. So I'm looking, when I was in DFW, I looked at a different number.
It's very close.
Right?
That looks like 5.7.
Yeah.
Right, it's approaching 6 right now.
Announced today for the nation, it's 5.4.
Yeah. So again, how does this impact our budget? Well, it impacts those areas that could potentially be affected by inflation. I circled all of these. The truth of the matter is there's a lot of contracted rates in here. Not only that, but when we estimated our expenditures, we did so conservatively. So even though I'm cutting back in some areas, I'm cutting out some of that, what I would call fluff in some of the budgets, we didn't cut it to the bone. We don't want to be at a point where literally, there's absolutely no room at all. We want to be responsible and estimate for things like inflation increases in fuel costs and other things along the line. So we did do that still, despite being able to cut back most areas of the budget. So that's the total area. Worst case scenario, let's say every penny of that were affected by inflation, it's $1,346,381 of the total general fund budget. The sales tax revenue for the general fund budget, just as a reminder, which has been estimated conservatively, meaning I fully anticipate to get more than that out of the budget, and we should. I don't know how much more, but this is what I feel safe budgeting and saying we're going to hit this number. This is higher than the last year. Last year was the budget amount was $1 million. Do you remember off the top of your head, Leroy? The general fund sales tax revenue 1.2, I think. It's 1.2 and change. So we actually are higher year over year, but the current budget, when we look at year-to-date numbers, we're going to come in at over this number. So our actual sales tax receipts, so budgeted year over year, we're higher budget, but if I take this number and compare to what I anticipate receiving by the end of this fiscal year, this is a lower number. That just gives you, I just want to give you some idea, some comfort level of how conservative it is. It's not terribly conservative, but there's some room. So what are the remedies for inflation? Well, obviously, one of the first remedies is what we're doing right now. Conservatively estimate your expenditures and revenues. That gives you a little bit more money to spend in your spending area and a little bit more revenue to spend it on, right, or to spend with. And then inflation is going to be offset by that sales tax revenue more than likely. So if we do experience inflation, I would expect that whatever that estimate is, it's going to be even higher. And then lastly, curtail spending. I mean, if it really comes to an issue and it's a real problem, then you start curtailing spending. And that'll show up as you start to come through. But not to be tongue-in-cheek or anything else about this, it is a serious issue. But I do feel very confident in the budget that's been brought forward that inflation won't be an issue this year. Year over year, again, that's why we look at it on an annual basis. The state, think about the state, they're adopting a biannual budget every time. I would be a little bit scared in this world to do a biannual budget, to be totally honest. But I trust that our state departments have probably sandbagged a little bit for that purpose, I'm guessing.
Must be engineers.
What's that?
They must be engineers.
Maybe a lot.
Maybe a lot, I don't know. I also think our legislators don't let them get away with too much. I am proud of Texas in that Texas is one of the few states that adopts a balanced budget every year. I'm sure y'all probably know that. But that, or I'm saying every biennium. That's in our Constitution, we must adopt a balanced budget. And thank God for that. A lot of states didn't have that. California, just throwing one out there. I really wish our United States had that as a policy.
Yes.
I think they could learn a lot from Texas. So here's so inflation impacts the operations, but I'd say it has a greater impact on our capital. So how does it impact our capital? Well, one of the ways is just from cost. So this is, I didn't do a clipping because I couldn't find a way to do it that was as legible as the last one, even though that wasn't really legible. There's 1,000 different PPI. This is producer price indexes. There's 1,000 different graphs like this. You can drill down in every area of producer price index and commodities and all that stuff. It's really, really specific. So what I chose, and in fact, just in the construction area, there's, I don't know how many, a bunch of different options. But I chose new office building just as an example because it's the closest thing we have to a city hall or like a fire building or something like that. You can see, I mean, just from January of 18 to January of 21, I don't know if you can tell, but it's about a 30% increase. Is that right? 18, yeah, from 30 to 25, more or less, or to 55. So it's about a 25% increase over that 3-year period. And that comports with what I've been told. So cost of new construction is going up. That's an inflationary trend that we can see. And that's going to impact, I mean, if we look at cost of asphalt and cost of laborers and cost of everything else. When we look at capital project in general, it's going to be more. This is another way to look at that same data. This actually aggregates all major cities in the United States. It looks at their individual costs of construction. I know it's a little bit hard to read. I'm sorry it's as blurry as it is. It wasn't that blurry before. But San Antonio is the one I've highlighted. What it says is that the cost for materials is about 98% of the national average. So it's a little below national average. And then it shows that the cost of installation is about 63%. I would wager that has a lot to do with our workforce, the fact that we do have cheap labor still. A lot of that's migrant labor that happens, and that actually is a benefit to Texas in some respects. Our overall composite score on the right for San Antonio is 83. What that means is they are 83% of the national average. Just for comparisons, I think I misstated this earlier to you, Mayor, as well. I was thinking of their installation. Their installation is 174% of the average, but their composite for New York is 132. So just when you think about people coming to Texas in droves, this is just one of the anecdotal reasons why. Look at what it costs businesses to construct in other states and other cities and what it costs here. And look what the land cost is and look what their taxes are, et cetera. Holistically, when they look at the big picture, there's a lot of, Texas provides a lot of
Look at the
value.
reds versus the blues.
It really is.
Wasn't going to go there and I'm moving on.
It's pretty evident, though.
Inflationary impacts on capital planning. This is another area. This is your cost to issue debt. And you can tell, again, from 2018, same time period that construction costs went up by 25%, the cost to borrow went down. So that's a good thing. I mean, this is, what this is actually looking at is the investor returns, right? Not your cost. But if the investor returns are going down, our cost to issue is going down. The two coincide in the same direction. What makes me a little bit concerned is you can see so as a stock trader, when I look at stocks, one of the things that I look at is a stock that's testing the bottom. And so you can see it tested the bottom in, that's 2020, kind of a little bit to the right of the middle of the graph, the big sharp line. Tested the bottom and then went right back up. You see it soared past that. Then it went back down and tested the bottom again, but it really didn't get very far. right? It went up to that 1.46, that 3-year average line. Then it tested the bottom again, and it hit that floor of 0.87. It gradually creeped past the bottom and then worked its way up. And then it kind of tested the bottom again a little bit, and it worked back way up. And now it's kind of testing the bottom again. So we're actually in a right now in a downward trend, but it is, when you look up, it's going up and to the right. From where it was in July of 20, the municipal rates are anticipated, the cost of borrowing is not going, I would not expect it to go down. It's going to go up in future years. And this is kind of underscored by, this is BlackRock, but they're just showing 10-year, 5, 10, 10, and 30-year yields. When your outer yields are up and to the right, your future cost of borrowing in the short term is also going to be out and to the right. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So inflation does have an impact on capital. I think I would argue it actually impacts the capital more than it does on your O&M, because you can have a short term, in a matter of 6 or 8 months, as we've experienced in the housing market, you can have something that used to cost $120,000 to build, and it can jump up to 200 plus. It's a significant increase to see in less than a year, and that's what we're seeing right now. So construction cost increases exceed the standard inflation by a considerable margin. Your cost of capital investment is steadily increasing. Your cost of borrowing is forecasted to increase as well, although right now it's at a historic low. It's this period of time is a historic low. What are our remedies? Well, one is invest as soon as you can. If you had money sitting on the sidelines, now would be a good time to go spend it on capital, because you're going to be able to borrow that money at the lowest cost possible, and all it's going to do is go up and to the right, is what we're anticipating. Carefully and conservatively estimate your future capitals as those projects come forward. Well, you better have a real strong idea of what that's going to cost, and really put pencil to paper and be conservative in those estimates, because you don't want to go issue, for instance, if you had to take stuff to the public and go say, hey, we're going to build this new police station, it's going to cost $2 million, and then we finally get it through and the bond passes and it's not $2 million, it's $3.2 million. Right? We don't want to be in that scenario. So you want to, if anything, you want to ask for more than you think you're going to spend, because in this environment, you don't want to be wrong, and you very well could be short, and that's the last thing you want to do, is be stuck with 3/4 of a building, right, or 3/4 of a project. Then lastly, utilize the completion incentives and fixed cost contracts. So when you finally do go and get your capital, you think you've got it right. Well, then you also don't want to be too loose when you go and actually contract with a person to do the work. Put them on a time schedule, incentivize them to be done early, and make sure that you have a fixed cost contract to a certain extent, right? So shelter yourself from loss. All right, I'm moving through this. Are there any questions about the stuff we discussed? This was all in general fund. We talked about a lot. I talked about tax rates. I talked about potential capital and how it might impact it. Any feedback or questions about any of that stuff?
Get him?
Not at this time.
All right. In that case, at 7:25, we are going to move forward to talk about the utility funds and the proposed budget of utility funds. So this is also all new, and it's pretty straightforward. And actually, this will be the shortest part of the meeting, I think. This is just looking at all the funds and giving a historical look, 16 through the current proposed budget in 21, 22. I'm sorry, because because the electric fund is so big, it makes the others minuscule, and it's really hard to see the drilled in differences. But I do have slides later that show that on the current budget versus proposed. And like I said, all these numbers will be available in Excel, and you can go look at it in that same folder where you found the budget workshop 1. There'll be a budget workshop number 2 with information.
Can you back up one slide?
Sure.
Thanks. Water, blue.
There's 2 blue bars, so it's a lighter blue.
Yeah, it's lighter blue. So basically, the current budget, you showed the water going up a bunch, which of course is why sewer went up. But in the proposed budget, you're bringing it back down lower. So you think that kind of they were overestimated in the current budget?
Yeah, like I said, I think we really sharpen our pencil year over year. And some of this, I do go through by we'll look at them by fund.
And by the way, so this is the administrative cost, okay, right? Or what is?
No capital, that's right. Now, there's capital in some of those past ones, right? So like the current budget, depending on again, I highlight all that.
But
as we go
these
through.
are expenditures?
Those are expenditures.
Okay, go on. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
there's not
Thank you.
revenues.
Yeah, I didn't know if there were expenditures or revenues.
So then this is kind of all, again, the same, all the different utility funds, current versus proposed. I'm going to break this out even more, so we're going to look at each one of them individually. This is the administration. So the administration is catch-all. It manages all the utilities. It has an increase of $503,000. It's the only one that increased year over year. I believe that's right. But that's in large part because of that 393,000 is us transferring general fund services over to the utility fund. And then we increased inspector pay. We had an inspector pay, our inspector position budgeted in the current budget. It's not been filled. One of the reasons it's not been filled is we didn't have the right amount for the salary, base salary. We couldn't attract anybody, so we've increased it by $10,000 to attract some folks that can actually apply. And then remember, all the funds are going to be impacted by two things, and that includes pretty much all these except for gas. Anybody that has people in it, they're impacted by that COLA that we talked about, the 3%, and then the cost of insurance, that 4% increase. So I didn't repeat it in every slide, but just know that that's one of the things that's impacting them.
What's an inspector do?
They're going to inspect all of the water and sewer infrastructures that's put in. So one of the costs, our cost, is to pay an engineer to do that right now. We outsource that.
Okay, so that's
And-
something you're bringing in-house.
Yeah, because it's cheaper to do that. And plus, we can do a little bit more with them, so maybe we can get them to do a little bit of the Bureau Veritas inspections and keep that revenue for ourselves as opposed to paying Bureau Veritas.
This is Bureau Veritas in the previous, you were paying them to do the inspection.
Some of it, not all of it. So they only do new construction, and they'd still be doing the tilt wall and all that. I mean, they're going to go inspect all of that, the signs. This is specifically for water, sewer, the infrastructure improvements, where we might have had Bureau Veritas inspecting some of that stuff. We're going to have to do that in-house. If I said that correctly? Okay, so we can recoup those costs.
So we're putting in a water line, contractors doing it for us, and we have an inspector out there. In the past, we've hired the engineers to do that. and
Right,
they do that
and
in-house.
they haven't always been here on the job, on site.
And we quit
This
paying
person
them.
would be on site.
We quit paying them, they quit coming.
When you look at, this is a good time to do this. If we're looking, it's not if, I mean, we've been talking about a number of different projects where we're going to do significant capital improvement. If we can get a qualified inspector to be on base, that's going to be a significant savings to the city for those projects.
It's going to be one?
One
in this
inspector.
budget?
Yeah.
This is an SLA of one.
Yes, so great, I appreciate you bringing that up. So one thing to be aware of is, now this isn't an SLA of one. This is not an SLA of one because it was already in the budget.
Oh,
Right.
You just couldn't fill it.
Right, it hadn't been filled, so I don't
But you
consider,
outsourced.
well, we'd already been outsourcing it, yes, we just continued to outsource it. The SLAs are only year-over-year changes, so technically I would consider this an SLA because it was already budgeted, but it would have been an SLA last year when you created the position. So that's a great observation. And I didn't call them SLAs, but you will see that in the subsequent slides where I say there's new personnel in the department, and those are SLAs. And that's what I mentioned earlier, I want to distinguish between the general fund and the utility funds. And part of that's because if the utility funds, and we'll go through it, if their revenues and expenditures can justify being able to add another person, and there is legitimate need, in other words, you've got the supervisor saying, we need another body here, we're having issues, I want to allow them to do that. I don't want to hamper them because it does not, as long as you'll see, as long as it doesn't have a major negative impact to the rate, we should have people there, right? And I want to give them that freedom to do that. $285,000 of capital was removed. So I want to be clear, another way to look at this is if it had an increase of $503,000, but you're not spending $285,000 in capital, then the net increase really includes, really is about 780,000. Does that make sense? If you were to spend that capital, that would have been built in the budget, and then you would have had those other increases. And I just want to be transparent about that. But again, we're not going to, that's cash-funded capital that we should be trying to borrow against, right? Or to use debt service to pay for. It includes debt service at 138. I just wanted to show you what debt service is costing by fund type or by area. That's utility admin. The gas budget, not a lot to say here because we don't have people over here. We did decrease it by 146,000. How did you decrease it if you don't have any people? Well, last year we did, actually in the current budget, we did this gas test that we have to do, I think, biannually, and it's around 100 grand. So expect that next year, you know, the gas is going to do this, right? Next year it'll go up by some amount.
5 years.
5 years? Okay. Okay. So every 5 years. So once every 5 years. Right. Or a boat, or a pool, yes. Here's your wastewater budget. Again, it decreased by 410. 236 of that was capital expenditures that were removed. The remainder, less than 200,000, is decrease in maintenance and decrease in contracted services. So again, that's just sharpening of the pencil. That's all that is.
So can you explain that a little bit better? Decreasing utility system maintenance to align with average cost.
Yeah, so when we gave them that sheet, those 5-year averages, and you looked at what, we might have budgeted $20,000 for a line item, but then when you looked at our average expenditures, it was like 8. When you look at year to date, it's like 6.5.
Yep.
Well, why do we have 20? Well, because it sounded good, and we thought we were going to need,
What did
well,
you call it a while ago? Fluffing?
yeah, a little bit of fluff, but again, I don't want to, I don't think it was
Whatever you
our,
want to call it?
right?
Sandbag.
Patent it?
Yeah, adding it a little bit, giving us room. I don't want to belittle the fact that we're going, as we go year by year, to the extent that it's actually needed. I want our department heads to have the support that when they feel like they actually need something, they've got to come forward. We'll argue for them. But when it's not needed, and we can kind of prove it's not needed, let's cut it out, right?
Absolutely.
And so to their credit, that's what they've done, mostly on their own, which is great. The debt service in the wastewater fund, $635,000. That's the annual payment. So just be aware that there's already a lot of debt service on that. When we talked about before about what a penny produces, well, we're not talking about pennies anymore. We're not talking about a tax rate that has some base. This is the actual amount that people pay on their water bill, right? And so there is, when we talk about the ability to raise rates, and so in the general fund, you would look at a per capita debt per household type thing, and there's kind of a ratio. Our financial advisor will talk to us about that when it comes time to do that. There's something similar in the utility systems. You don't want to rates become unbearable. And we all know when people start screaming, you're probably getting close, right? And so I just want to be aware of that, and that's part of that cost of service study that they'll come back and tell us, kind of how our rates compare and how much room there is. That was wastewater. This is water, right? Yeah. So a decrease of $436,000 in the water budget. 247 of that was capital expenditures. And then we also reduced the general fund transfer by 204. I do want to point out, this fund has 1.5 new full-time employees. How do you have 1.5? Well, it's because I'm only budgeting 1 for a full year and then 1 maybe 6 months into the year that we try and hire. Right now, we've been operating with 2 people. It's JJ and Chris. Oh, I can see Christopher, but JJ and Chris, and literally, like, just think about your own life, holidays, the need to do. There's 2 of them. That's it, right? So that's been a real strain. We do have 3 budgeted positions. One of the people's been out for medical reasons. So this would help fill that gap. But what's amazing is that, I mean, this kind of speaks to that level of pencil whipping that occurred. So they added 1.5 people, but they ended up with a net decrease of 436. 247 plus 204 is 447, right? So the net increase, if you look at the delta, is only about $13,000. So they were able to, whatever that cost was to add those people, they were able to recoup most of that cost just by reducing some of that fluff, right? Did you, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
She did better math. that's
I
all.
did better math, sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Call me out, that's all right. And this includes debt service for the water side of $239,000. And I think I said water earlier, but it's sewer, obviously. And what's the 635? Well, that's the new sewer plant. That's your new sewer plant. Yeah, I went back, I'm sorry. So now we're back to water. All right, and then the last one is going to be electric. We do have airport to go to, but decrease of $1 million in electric. Well, $926,000 is capital. So some of that is going to be the capital that we just approved, general fund, the River Bluff. That's that approved in that approved capital electric. And we did set ourselves up to be able to pay ourselves back if we issued a bond. So that's a huge part of that $1 million decrease. The rest is just maintenance to align with the average cost. So going back to what you asked, Mayor, we looked at the average, what are you spending, and try to better align with that.
And no debt service in here?
No. I don't think there's, not yet. Yeah, not yet. But they do have one new full-time employee.
But we will have debt service by the end of this budget cycle, won't we? Because we're
In
gonna go out for
electric?
the bonds to do the River Bluff.
No, you all have not directed me to go out for bonds for River Bluff. I created the capacity, but we didn't say we would.
Okay, but when you decrease your capital expenses,
But that's, okay, so, yes. That's what was budgeted. We're looking at budgeted numbers. So we're talking about, right now, the current plan is to spend down that fund balance. There's no plan to issue debt unless y'all say you want to. I've prepared you so you can, but right now, the plan is to spend $646,000 of fund balance. You have 3.2 or whatever.
okay.
So, yeah. But that would take you down, when you talk about days of operating,
Take
their
money out of
budgets,
our back pocket.
yeah, well, and their budget's quite a bit more expensive. So the number of days of operating, you're not going to have a lot of fudge in, or extra fund balance after you spend that 646. I can't remember how much is left, but
Unless we go out and get bonds.
that's not a huge amount. Okay, this is just the airport. That's a decrease of 150. A big part of that's repairs and maintenance, $100,000. I'm sure that probably had to do with ramp grant money. I'm not actually sure that we reduced it.
And a part-time person?
And yeah, that's adding a part-time airport operations technician. Now, that person is actually already there.
What does part-time mean? Is it a half a person?
Yes. It's hourly. It's an hourly paid employee. We have a full-time employee out there, and
What does that mean, operations technician? What does he do?
he does everything ISA does. Do you know who ISA is? So he's basically ISA's right-hand person now.
I got you.
ISA's health has been failing over the years, and we want to allow him to work as long as he possibly can, but we also are trying to build in
Yeah,
some
backup.
ability. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Fixing wind damage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fueling planes.
And then I think we're getting close. We do have it in there. Oh, I didn't know it would come in because I actually, all right, awesome.
Nice.
I downloaded this. I thought it was, I didn't think it would update it. So there's your all revenue funds, and there's no change year over year. This is exactly the same as what we had budgeted last year, in part because these, what I consider these funds to be immaterial to the overall budgets.
I thought we raised the hotel motel tax by 1%. So why shouldn't we see an increase there?
Did you do it in the current budget year?
We just voted to do it the last meeting.
Oh, okay.
For 22? Yeah.
Well, I'll recognize that. That's right, we did. We went for 13, so
Yeah.
I'll put it in there. It's still going to be immaterial, that 1%.
I know, it's not going to be.
Yeah. But you're right. I probably ought to throw it in. The other part of this is the revenue, like the hotel motel. At present, not saying that we can't ever do it or we won't ever do it, but at present, the uses of those funds haven't changed. They go to support the Steinbach House, so if we get $72,000 or $78,000, either way,
Still gonna go.
It's going to go to Steinbach until y'all direct it to be somewhere else. And it's not significant enough to really kind of.
And the part-time employees, that's all already, we've been doing that.
We used to have three, now we have one.
Yes.
When you say part-time, it says towards July 4th. Do they just work holidays or?
Are you talking about my
No,
sidewalk?
this is
That was
the
$5,000.
fireworks.
And-
They contributed.
$5,000 donation.
Oh.
Hotel motel paid for part of
I got
fireworks,
Considered an event.
4th of July.
you. Yeah, okay.
And part of the way we got away with this is that we had events on the Friday and Saturday. You had the Fiorella Friday the night before, and then you had the Saturday event. So it's technically a 2-day event. People could conceivably come in town, stay in a hotel.
That's what you call it,
participate.
business posture.
That's where the tourism comes into play. If we could do more of that, that'd be great.
Like what you think.
All right.
Tax down.
Yeah, are there any questions about this stuff that we just talked about, utility funds? I said before, I don't want to minimize this. It is our role to oversee these, but by and large, I'm going to spend a lot more time on the general fund, less time on utility fund, because utility funds, ideally, once we get them sorted, once we go through this cost of service analysis and that kind of thing, then it's a matter of just checking to make sure that we're still consistent with whatever intent we established through that process that will take place later, probably in August. So no other questions on that?
I'll put a bookmark. I do want to dig deeper into the hot funds and just make sure that we understand exactly what's coming in, where it's going, and looking at it in terms of tourism. How effective are we being at meeting the actual intent of the hot funds?
So, go ahead.
I'm over that because I'm the tourism rep, if you didn't know that. And so, for the most part, of course, there's guidelines, I say strict guidelines. The tourism budget does include the advertisement. Last year I didn't advertise in Houston, but we have some magazines that has been ongoing to where you want to advertise outside of the area to bring people in. We had an influencer come in here about a month ago that's going to do some write-ups. And of course, there's some different things. We've been involved with the eclipse that's coming in 2024. That's going to be a huge thing.
That's going to be so
around
cool.
here. And that'll be part of the stuff that we'll look at to try to, because there will be people come in. And hopefully we get new hotels eventually.
I got a question. Isn't this where that sign, the Welcome to Castroville sign, was pulled out of as well?
No.
Okay.
No, that 25,000 was out of the council's budget.
Came out of council money, but that was just a seed money. We haven't, all we did so far is we put some money in as seed money, and we created a policy that would provide for the city to own and maintain the sign. We've never taken any action since.
Correct. And
So
that's in your budget.
It's possible, because it would fit in the guideline, but it has never been done yet by the council.
Well, let me back up. So, just as the same with staff, if the staff budgets $35,000 for a new air conditioning unit, because they think one's going to go out, and it doesn't go out, and at the end of the year, they don't spend that money. Next year rolls around and we do their budget, but we do not budget for an AC unit. They do not magically have $35,000 they can go spend on an AC unit when that thing goes out,
Right.
because it wasn't budgeted.
Right.
Each year,
Right.
clean slate,
Yeah.
right?
CIP.
Fund balance.
Yeah, so that's where it shows up, thank you, Todd, is that money goes into fund, unexpended funds go into fund balance, and then they get allocated again. So, to the extent that there's not institutional knowledge in the form of this budget creation process and items that y'all may have considered in the past, please do not take for granted or just assume that, oh, we budgeted it, it's still there. If you budgeted it for this year, I would encourage you, let's go figure out how to spend that this year, if that's, or let's make sure the new budget
Has it in there.
has it in there, because I haven't added, I can just tell you, there's no sign in my budget that I know
Well,
of.
it should be in the
Chase
special,
that dog.
the special events.
I have $35,000 in the council budget,
Right. and that-
but that's not enough to do a $25,000 for a sign, because you've got True to Castroville, for whatever that costs, is that $5,000?
Yeah, it's not.
You've got, what?
They used to do a seed match on the tourism.
But
Right, but-
if we did create a capital improvement plan for that sign and assign it to a logical time period when we think we'll need it, and we put it into the budget in that particular slot, then it will be retained.
Agreed.
Not in the current
Yeah,
budget, but
and
in the out-year budget.
Yeah, and so when we're talking about capital investment specifically, that's the beauty of a CIP, of a capital improvement plan, is that it's multi-year, and there are a lot of, like, I don't just track the first 5 years, although really the most accurate are the first 3. You can get really close with the first 3. The outer 2, because of all the reasons we talked about inflation, you're really not. I mean, you just throw some wild numbers out there and and try to be close. But you're really not. It's first 3 that are accurate. Last 2 are just good placeholders. And then we keep all the rest of it. But they fall under what I call unfunded, unless they truly are funded. But you might have a list of quite a few, and this could be anywhere on the list, funded or unfunded, but it is being tracked if it's a capital. And that's one of the things that we will develop together, is that kind of that capital plan and prioritizing them. And we'll go out to the community. My full intent is to bring those to the community and let them look at them and give us our feedback. But if you intend to spend cash, because you can spend cash on capital, as you well know, if your intent is to spend, and sometimes for smaller items like the kiosk, for instance, there's no reason to capitalize. I don't need to lease it. I can go spend some cash on hand and buy it and own it. The same thing may be true of a sign. If you thought $25,000 was the total budget, well, we've got a lot of fund balance. We can just go out and buy that, right? Or if it's the sprinkler system at the parks, that might be a $20,000 improvement, or a $30,000 or $40,000 improvement. Well, you may not want to capitalize that. You may not want to borrow funds. You may want to just spend fund balance and earmark that for that's where it's coming from. When I build the CIP, if for some reason those do not get expended, that's part of that budgeting process. Is I carry those through a process that Leroy and I work on. We carry those forward year to year to make sure that we're still recognizing the uses of the fund balance reserves for cash funded projects. So just, if I hadn't been clear on that process in the past, hopefully that clarifies things.
And just to talk about the sign, we are still looking at that. We've got at least one developer that is looking at maybe donating that. So I think I still think that's really important. I think that we need to have that entrance.
It just needs to be in the repertoire that we have, and I think you're right. There's no doubt in my mind that a developer will step up.
Yeah.
I know one of them told me personally,
Yep.
you take care of it.
Yep. So, but that's part of the.
We don't know where we want it yet.
Right.
We don't know what we want yet.
Well, we
But
have
I think one of the things
we have
that's.
to own the land.
I'm sorry, say
We
that.
have to own the land. That's now state law, so, and we don't on the east side.
But our
of town.
policy document that we created 3 years ago specified in an ordinance that we're going to have to go buy the land and plan for the O&M budget and buy the access for right-of-way so that we can maintain it. But we don't know where it's going to be yet, because the city's moving. You know, where's it going to be? I don't know.
It's going to be on a trailer. We're just going to move it.
House trailer.
Solar battery, solar collector.
Is that an engineered sign then?
Actually, though, don't you have some old trucks that don't have engines in them?
Yeah, yard art. There you go.
Yeah, put them on a yard.
Wouldn't be bad.
I need to send you-
Logo on the
I need to
door,
send you that
everything.
ordinance if you've never seen it. And there's a lot of background that a lot of smart people did, a lot of good ideas, but it's never been moved on.
That's good. Yeah, we should include that in the capital planning process, for sure.
I agree.
Well, I think
So
that was part of what your point is that what has happened, I think what's happened in the past is you have, because council turns over, and it's turned over a lot, actually. It's turned over too much in the last number of years. And you'll lose some of these things if you don't continue to track them forward and say, this is what we did. You know, I was talking to Sammy about this, and he's like, we've got all these plans and had all of these things, and they just get lost. So part of this is making sure that we've got something that is enduring, something that is persistent, and something that we can go back and review every year, whether the council remains the same or whether we get another member or two. Then we can continue that continuity and make sure that these things don't get lost.
So there's not a number, a dollar figure that would tell you or make you decide this is a CIP deal?
There is in general, and in fact, I've got some, in that document that I'm creating, I've already kind of, there's some language that'll be in there to help you define And that's one of the process I think Leroy and I will probably bring forward to you is a financial policy document that addresses, well, what is the right number of days to have in fund balance and that kind of stuff. But part of that is also how do we define what we're doing as CIP versus not. It's a little bit loose because you can have stuff that is, it's generally $25,000 or more with a life of 10 years or greater. But again, so generally that defines what goes in the capital plan. How you pay for it, totally different discussion. Because there's some things that really do make sense to just cash pay for, or maybe a developer is going to put up the funds, or maybe it's going to be a joint effort. And then there's other things you're going to go and
Depending
borrow.
on the number.
Right. Well, and just what it is, and what the opportunities are. Right. If you haven't already done it, if you go look at Westlake, Texas, go to their Westlake, Texas. I can't remember. Westlake, just look up Westlake, Texas. Google it. If you type in CIP, it should take you straight to their CIP page. But once you get to the landing page, you go to departments, finance, capital improvements, or CIP documents. They've got a list of them from 2015 to present. That's the template that I built while I was there. I didn't do it alone. I had help from others. But it's a great thing to go look at if you want to have an idea of kind of where I'm coming from and what my end goal is with you all. It's that type of a document. I think I showed it to some of you. I don't know if I showed it to all of you. But I'll send out a link later so you can go and look at it. But that's very much in the vein of where I'm headed. All right.
What do we got left?
This is it.
Okay.
Mission, vision,
I'm
values.
fixing to go to sleep.
Okay. I'll try not to put you to sleep. We are gonna run
And
through
my
this.
wife wants supper yet tonight.
We are gonna run through this pretty quickly. If there's no other questions or comments on the prior, I will move into.
Just back on the signs, by the way,
Yes.
the sign west of town, because I just asked Arnie, but it's getting put up any day now. The one west of town. It's the
Oh,
one
yeah?
east of town that Herb's talking about,
Right.
that we need to buy the property.
Right.
And we need to move the sign because the current leaseholder doesn't want it there anymore.
It's gone, yeah.
Yeah, they totally took it down.
It's MIA already.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
if you didn't, and if you thought Church's Fried Chicken was gonna use any part of that building,
Oh, my
you're
goodness.
way wrong.
That thing disappeared in a day.
They're not even using the slab.
This church is not Kentucky Fried Chicken.
I'm sorry, Church's.
They've got to
My
get
mistake.
they've got to get the gas tanks out.
We need a Popeyes. We need a
I watched the
Popeyes.
KFC go in,
Yeah.
and they brought it pre-built. It was pretty amazing. It was there in 2 days, the whole structure.
Well,
Pretty
that
cool.
Golden Chick went up pretty fast too.
Well, KFC specifically,
Hey,
they
can we
pretty
change
fast.
subject? You make me hungry.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
some of us
sorry.
haven't had dinner yet.
All right, yeah, I'm with you. So at 7:55, 7:54, we're going to go into mission,
See you,
vision,
John.
values. Thank you, John.
Thanks.
9 a.m.
9 a.m.
That's our staff meeting in the morning. So I cut down these slides significantly. You're welcome. I just wanted to recap how we do it, why we do it, what we do, values, vision, mission. What is our mission? This is what we landed on last time. Preserve Cashville's rich culture, historic architecture, and natural environment so that friends and family can continue to enjoy a true community steeped with a pioneering spirit and camaraderie. Then we talked about our values. Values should be used as a decision-making filter. I keep this up there simply because it is important. These are not just words we say. They are things that should drive our decision-making. So this is what we kind of landed on. The homework I gave you last time was to think about visioning. If you couldn't think of a vision, give me just kind of a list of things that you think would be desirable for Castroville. The homework for tonight is on the values specifically. If you can help me better define, if you believe that these are our core values, because I haven't heard anything to the contrary, if you can help me define, much in the way that I think, was it Rowlett we looked at? Did, what does it mean we are stewards? Stewards to who? Of what? What's the purpose? Why? What mission are we fulfilling by being stewards? Do that for each one of these. How are we empowering? Who are we empowering? Help me to help define that a little bit, because these can be, if you can kind of think about it, they're one point on a compass. If you just have one point, any line, any direction intersects. If you start to put some additional points, you're starting to actually draw a line and say, this is what this means, right? So right now, these are just single points. We need to maybe put a few more points out to the
There
left and
were
right.
more points behind that, too.
There probably were. And if you have them, then they're probably out on that deal, but maybe reshare them out with the group.
Perfect. All right.
This is all, I didn't put that slide in there, but on that pyramid, I'm trying to be careful because this really is your domain. It's not for me to influence. So I want to encourage as much cooperative learning as I can through you all. So, and there's not, you can not, we don't want to create a quorum or offsite meetings, but there are places where you can drop your thoughts in that box for the rest of everybody else to read. So then when we come to this meeting, you're better prepared to have that discussion. You've shared it in a common place.
Will you send a link to that box? You keep talking about that box, and I'm having trouble finding it.
Yeah, it's that SharePoint site. So I will.
You sent out a
Will
link.
you send a link out like you did for the first briefing?
It's the same link.
And
It's the same. So where you go to see those files, there's a bunch of different folders, and it's the way I organize those. It's like you would organize your file cabinet. So you might have finance, city council meetings, that kind of thing. So
thank you.
this is probably under city council agendas and retreats.
Okay.
That's probably where that retreat is. It's under the city council general. But it's that same link. You go to the same site and just dig around. This is the vision. We don't really have a stated vision. That's that one from Rowlett on the left, and then on the right is kind of what we had in the comp plan. And my homework for you all is just kind of send me that list. If you aren't as creative as Paul and can't actually give us a visual walkthrough of what it looks like, or I think Darren did the same thing, a list of, okay, well, what do you think is right? What kind of restaurants? What kind of roads? What kind of parks? What kind of trails? What's your to-do list? Because ultimately, that's what I'm going to narrow this down to anyway. Is we're going to take this vision and turn it into actionable. Here's where we can invest our money because it aligns with that vision. So if you want to cut to the chase and provide some of that, that works too. So that's still blank. This is just how it all works together. This is the Rowlett kind of example. You've got the vision, mission, and values. That their values make that cute little spirit acronym. Just another way to look at it. Purpose, vision, value, strategy, midterm, short-term goals. Once we get done with that, once we establish a vision, the next step, I don't want to make you feel like this doesn't ever end, but we'll get really close to the finish line, because then we take that vision and we put it through what we call strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, that SWOT analysis. We try to figure out, okay, what makes this happen? What can we leverage to make sure that this happens? What are the outside forces that are going to work against us to prevent it from happening? What are the internal struggles that we have that are going to prevent that from happening, and how do we fix those? So it really starts to help us. We're getting really close to actually defining some key objectives through that process. And then once that, what comes out the other end of that are KPIs, key performance indicators, and specific objectives and investment goals, and where we're going to spend our money and that kind of thing. All right, that's it, Tom. Thank you for bearing with me. I know it was a little bit longer. I had hoped it'd be like a 2-hour meeting, but it was a 3-hour meeting. Cool. But I think we had some really good discussion. I really appreciated the input I got. That was very, very helpful. If you have any other offline, hey, I thought of this. I think we should invest in this area. 27th will be the next meeting. I'll bring some of that forward.
And just a reminder for anybody that's still listening, if they've made it through the 3 hours, this is really crucial in giving Scott and staff an idea of exactly what we're looking for. It gives them, one of the things that I've heard in the past was we need to give better direction to staff, and this is exactly what we're doing. They're going to go and implement the strategy that we put together. So I know this has been a lot of work, but it's very beneficial. And at that, I'm going to be quiet. Unless there's any other conversation, let's adjourn at 8:01. Well, because you were giving me the stink eye. Thank you.